Have we done it? Have we done it? Have we done it? Glory be and mercy me. We've done it yet again. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. I feel completely wiped out. The protest went very, very well. It was very, very good. It was a wonderful showing. Lots of good support. Big shout out, big thank you to the Socialist Action fellows. That's Barry Weissletter. That's Daniel. A couple of other Socialist Action people coming out. Big thanks to the Socialist Action people. It's always good. Like, this is why I say again and again, right? Get involved with a third party, like non-affiliated socialist or communist organization, right? Find the one that's actually going to things, right? Like, you can have your disagreements, and I do have disagreements with Socialist Action on things. But what matters to me more than anything else is that they are coming out. They're actually showing up. And, oh man. So those guys showed up. I had a friend show up. A big shout out to several of my own members who showed up. I don't want to dox who those people are, so I won't name names, but several of the people in our own chat actually came out to the protest. It was really wonderful, really nice to see some of these people for the first time. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for coming. Boy, did that make that so much nicer. And then even more heartwarming and even better. Hey, Conton. Hey, Ligandes. How you doing? Even bigger was random people came. People who just had received one of the flyers, who had never come out to one of these events before, and just somebody who saw the flyer that we were handing out and thought, you know what, I am going to come, and they did. So that was a very that expands my heart quite a great deal. I've been thinking for a while now how negative. Oh, you can say that, Ligandes. That's totally fine, dude. That's totally fine. I just don't want to be the one to put people out there. No. That's fine. Like, if you want to tell your story, you can go right ahead with that, bud. I don't think that's my place to take someone else's story from a protest and display it. But if you want to do that for yourself, you go right ahead, bud. I'm perfectly happy with that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much. And Daniel is basically a public figure, right? He puts his stuff out there, so it's no hope for him. No hope for him. The frantic story and the behind the scenes part of it is that there was a miscommunication with our sound system, and so we didn't find out until the day of that we didn't have access to a sound system, and because it's the holiday, right? I'm spending the entire day rushing around trying to find a sound system, and there's a friend of mine who really seized the moment and really helped me out, did me an enormous solid, and we managed to get a single speaker, which was excellent. It was an excellent speaker with a Bluetooth connection, and it really worked. It really worked and really brought everything together. So what a successful event. It was very uplifting for me. It was very uplifting for me that people were coming out to this, and we've got to continue gathering energy. We've got to continue gathering. Radio Halifax, don't know if I've ever seen you here. Good to see you. Hey, Methane, how you doing? How you doing? Just reiterating the protest story. And so now I feel beat up. It was very exhausting, very frantic day yesterday. And of course, I didn't help myself out by coming home and immediately having, a drink or two or three. Maybe one too many. Conton has a quick question. Has anyone at all considered the climate indications of hot conventional war between the West and China? I'm convinced such a thing would push us beyond the brink. Yeah, of course. Of course it would. Every single time there's been a war with heavy ordnance and all that, especially nuclear, climates spike, right? I've got my all-time favorite thing to show climate change deniers is 100% this guy right here. Right? If we take a look at this is the average temperatures for the month of June since 1883. This little spike up that you see right over here, right? This little spike up that you see right over here, well, that's World War II, right? What happened in World War II? Well, we dropped some nukes, didn't we, in World War II, right? Then you have, it tracks to other wars. So if it jumps from an average temperature of about here to here during World War II, what do you think is going to happen as the average temperature hits here, right? Well, what's going to happen? So it's a total disaster. Anemone, good to see you. Good to see you, Anemone. No, I mean, this is why I think one of the things that we should begin rallying around, this protest that we just held was an ODSP protest. Very important issue, if you ask me. But I think it's time for us to start really grabbing onto climate change as an issue here in Toronto. It looks to me as though Extinction Rebellion, which is has been the climate change group, looks to me like they're completely defunct. So I think it's time for other groups to begin organizing on those principles, because the question becomes who are the people who are going to what is going to actually get people into the streets? What is actually going to galvanize people and get people en masse in big ways into the streets? And to me, the last major protest that happened here in Toronto was the climate change protest. Haven't heard of Extinction Rebellion in a bit. Yep, and if you go to their website hasn't been updated in a long time. If you send them an email, they won't respond. As far as I'm concerned, they're defunct. I don't, nobody's in charge. There's nobody. What can happen, and this is, I talked to Daniel about this on the channel not that long ago. Well, it's been a while now, I suppose, but and he's more or less of the opinion that because they're an anarchist group, they don't have a central organization as a principle, almost, right? And so they have no central organization. And so when things get disorganized or when things get defunct like this, it isn't anyone's responsibility to reorganize it, right? There's no one who has been stated with the sole purpose or the authority within the organization to gather and reintegrate or do any of that, because there is no central organizational structure. And so I feel like it's likely that you have a lot of anarchist types in Extinction Rebellion who want to do stuff and want to move around and do all this kind of stuff, but that but it's everybody else's responsibility, right? So so the tires are spinning. The tires are spinning. And so I think it's up to everybody else to start picking it up. And not even nuclear exchange, just an all-out conventional war would fuck us up environmentally. Well, I mean, and it's a worthwhile thing to talk about, right? We've got Pelosi. We've got Pelosi confirmed. Yeah, confirmed. Pelosi arrives in Taipei, right? This is a total dick-waving move. Hey, Barnabas, how you doing, bud? I've been here many times. This is Nova Scotia Commie on a different account. Perfect. Good to see you, radio. Good to see you, Nova Scotia. There you go. Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan is as dick-wavy as it gets, right? That even the Americans' policy in regards to Taiwan has been a one China principle. Uh, but recently, there have been people in the death cult who have been saying that that's an outdated principle. That now Taiwan is up for grabs. And yeah, Compton, FBI conducts coordinated raids against black liberation organizations. Yeah, nothing new, right? Nothing new, right? Yeah, why go to a random eastern province of China? Yeah, because they want war. That's what it is. Is that look? If all you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail, right? And the Americans don't understand how to do diplomacy. They like straight up. They to them diplomacy is dictating terms, and if you bend the knee to those terms, and as long as that's all you do, then you don't get bombed and invaded. But if you don't bend the knee, and if you do your own thing, right, or if you fly in the face of the American empire, then you get bombed. That's the basis of what America would call diplomacy, right? You can see it throughout history, again and again and again. America goes to a country and says, this is what you're doing. And if the country goes, yes, sir, then everything's hunky-dory, right, to the Americans. But if you say no, well, then they'll bomb you, coup you, invade you, right, do all the crazy shit that a place like America will do. And it doesn't, as we enter this multipolar world, right, it's not a fan of this. America doesn't want to enter a multipolar world. It's not interested in that, right? When Russia stands up and says it's now a multipolar world, America goes, get bent, Jack. Like fuck you, Jack, right? It's not keen on this idea of and it doesn't want to live in a multipolar world. It doesn't accept this idea that there's a multipolar world. It wants Russia and China to bend the knee. That's what it wants. And because fundamentally, America is a white supremacist country, right? That rules on white supremacist principles. And if you're not going to, and if you say that you're in a multipolar world, right? A diverse world, a multicultural world, right? An international world, then you no longer can follow or abide by white supremacist rules, right? Because white supremacy demands that there's a hierarchy and that there's a one at the top. There must be a supreme. There must be a one, right? So you can't have diversity. You can't have a multiculturalism. You can't have all of that kind of stuff. We need a winner, and that winner is the white power structure. It must be that way if you're America. And this is why they absolutely do not tolerate anybody saying to them, we're not interested in doing business that way, right? America will not tolerate that. And so when it comes to starting wars with Russia, when it comes to starting a war with China, right, it's not rational what's happening, right? It's not like they're sitting there being like, oh, well, we can gain something here. Like, it's just that they don't understand even how to exist in a world that is multipolar. It's simply not built into their minds or into their ethos at all. That we could have a peer? No. The only time America will ever say it has a peer is if it follows the word competitor, right? Because that's how America views things. Because it's a hierarchy, right? That's how they talk about it. It's a meritocracy hierarchy upon which only one may stand. And so if you have a peer, it's just because you're now competing to see which one will stand atop the pyramid. You can't simply coexist. You can't simply have a neighbor who is also strong and is also taking care of things. That's also communicating with the world. That's also out there. That you can't have that. That's not possible, right? That seeing a strong neighbor is a threat to someone like you, right? Like if you imagine America and China and Russia and Europe and all these places as people living in houses in a community, right? Well, America is just this crazed psycho, like Harley Quinn type schizophrenic character who literally, if she looks out across the neighborhood and sees China leaning over and talking to Brazil, right? And they're laughing and having a good time and they like exchange recipes or whatever, right? Well, America's next step is to find a way to drive a wedge between those two because America's crazy, right? Like America is a crazed, bloodthirsty psychopath with a little grin on her face. So when she shows up, you think, oh, hey, she's cute and adorable and lovely, right? Like Britney Spears or something. But then she will like drop bombs on your house, right? Like she will do that. And so America's strategy, you can see what America's strategy is in regards to China when they released, because America has become so arrogant and self-assured of itself, right? Because it's gotten to that point now where it's so convinced that it is overtly, amazingly the most powerful force on the planet, and no one could ever say otherwise. Well, it publishes its strategies publicly and sends them into the public sphere for everyone to see, right? So back in like 2015, 2016, the Rand Corporation published a document. This is Pentagon. You can actually find this, Thinking Through the Unthinkable, War with China, right? This is the Rand Corporation, Thinking Through the Unthinkable. Literally public, open source. Anybody can read this. You can read it online, right? The Chinese likely have, right? And basically what it says is we can wipe out Chinese trade in the water, right? And we can do that pretty easily. That America's fairly confident that wiping out sea trade for the Chinese is it would reduce the power of the Chinese economy by something like 30 to 40%, and that the Chinese wouldn't really be able to retaliate very successfully, and that this would really hinder. So basically, you're trading American blood for, CEO gold, essentially, blood for gold, as always. And of course, what have the Chinese done? They took a look at this and they said, yeah, you know what? That's probably right. So we're going to build a internal rail system. We're going to build a rail system that connects with the rest of the world. Because most of the world's population lives on this continent, right? America is like a rinky-dinky, like little annoying, like crazed lunatic sitting on their island way off on the side as far as China's concerned, right? And so I suspect that we are going to see America do everything it can to escalate, because it doesn't know how to do anything else. It doesn't know what else to do, right? It certainly doesn't know how to be nice. It certainly doesn't know how to make good trade deals. It certainly doesn't know how to operate in like a win-win strategy. Certainly, it doesn't know how to do any of that. It's completely disinterested in doing any of that. And so it won't. And and if we allow them to continue operating this way, right, they're going to destroy us. They're going to destroy us in a very straightforward manner. It's going to be very obvious. And because China is actually organized and actually has like things like plans and ideas and thoughts, because they actually have a history that they actually look at and attempt to learn from, they're advancing much much more quickly than the Americans are, right? That the Americans have essentially been relying on hucksters and frauds like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates to advance the civilization in any kind of meaningful way through this idea of competition on a free market. And the truth is that if you hand all of this power and wealth and prestige to these salesmen hucksters, well, the only advance that they're going to try to find is how to advance their own wealth, right? They don't care about creating a new technology. They don't care about creating a new, like, we're all gaga because Bezos fired a rocket that didn't even get into space. It like scratches the surface of space. Back in the 60s, we landed people on the fucking moon. Like, who gives a shit about that at all, right? It's only impressive because of the enormous exploitation and the exploitive nature of it. And so but it's the chaotic, like, non-plan, right? The only things that are getting created in America or in the West are things where Westerners are convinced they can sell them, right? Whereas China is thinking about things in terms of how do we secure our place as a civilization? How do we build a civilization that is resilient, that is powerful, that is strong, that can defend itself, right? And so China is coming out with like quantum computing. They're starting to turn on reactors that burn hotter than the sun. They're creating technologies that we would consider future tech, right? They're creating stuff that is making like the iPhone look like a toy, right? And we are going to fall behind. You have major policy people in the Rand Corporation saying that if we do not actually do something about this, we are simply not going to be able to launch a war against China. If they have quantum computers and we're operating on our computers, they can literally hack missiles as they're in the air, right? Like, we aren't going to be able to fight them because they're going to have computing technology that is so much faster than our computers that if we literally attempt to bring a warship in their direction, they will hack the warship. Like, this is why they're always about cybersecurity. Well, if your computer is 10 times faster, right, then you can launch more attacks than they can defend. And this is where the Chinese are getting to. And this is where some, like, crazed right-winger would say, and that's why we need to stop these Chinese. That's why we need to go over there and blow up all their stuff and take over all that kind of stuff because they're a threat. Whereas I'm going to sit here and be like, you know what we should do? We should create stable, rational systems of trade. We should create a manufacturing base of our own here in America. We should actually attempt to build a stable society that's of any value and has any worth whatsoever. So that we actually can interact with the world in a way that is sustainable or friendly or interesting or nice, right? The biggest problem for the American future outside of this climate change catastrophe that's going to destroy everybody is that they have nothing to offer. That's the real truth about what's happening and what's going to happen to America, is that America and Canada, unfortunately, we're going to go with them because we're not very smart. We're like the little sidekick to America. We're basically going to get sequestered into the corner and basically just told, okay, you know, that's nice, right? Like, we'll be treated very much how England is treated, with this kind of like patting on the head. Yeah, and we'll be like, we used to be an empire, and everybody will be like, oh yeah, okay, whatever you say. And every so often we'll blow something up, right? Like the fucking psychos that we are. And the world will go, boy, we wish these guys would stop blowing things up like these fucking psychos, right? And that's the future for America and Canada. We're just going to be put in the corner, essentially. China follows Sun Tzu closely. The U.S. follows their profit motive closely. Yeah, like, China has philosophy. And America has philosophy too, right? It's just their philosophy is usually, we're the best, you should die. God, what still kind of kills me is right-wingers are opposing war, while rainbow flag waving liberals are pro-war or pro-imperialism. It does seem to be that way, doesn't it? Right? It does seem to be that way, that there is a strong anti-war sentiment that exists on the right. And, if you actually, like, a lot of these right-wing Christians are still Christians, right? A lot of their rulers pretend to be Christians, but a lot of their voters may actually be Christians. And being anti-war is a very Christian position, right? Sure, there's the just war justification, right, that comes out of Christianity. But something like the Iraq War is like the exact opposite of what any Christian nation would actually embark on, right? And so, yeah, it's always complex. There's always something fucked up. Do these people not understand the basics of humanity or something? They do not. Like, help your neighbor so you can both improve and be stronger working together. Spread the power. It's the only way. It's not the only way, Methane. You can also go into their house and kill them and steal their stuff. That's another way. You can operate that way. You could be doing that right now, Methane. Right? Like, there's a great thinker in international politics by the name of John Mearsheimer, right? And John Mearsheimer really points out, like, there's no, when you get into international politics, like on the highest level, like there's no international body, right? Like, if you walk into your neighbor's house and kick in the door and kill them and steal their stuff, there's a high chance that there's going to be some kind of, like, other organization that's going to have something to say about that, like the police, right? CSIS or the FBI, right? Like the CIA even, right? No such organizations exist on the international politics because they can't really, right? Like, if the United States decides to go and mess up Mexico, well, no one can do anything about it, really, right? Like, it just does come down to the force of your strength. And this is how America has chosen. And at this point, you can call it a choice, right? Like, it's not like they don't understand that this is how they operate. You can see psychopaths like John Bolton openly admit that this is how they want to operate in the world stage. And and so this ethos of theirs, right? Like, it runs counter to the ethos that you present, which is what seems to be what China is trying to do, right? Improve your neighbor, right? Have win-win diplomacy, all of this kind of stuff, right? Spread the power, right? Nope. It's not how America thinks. It's not what America does. And you're right, like, they do not understand the basics of humanity. They worship money. And they always have, right? They worship money. It's not going to stop. What even is the point of Americans' military budget if they're going to get punked by the Chinese like that? Yeah, China's military budget is a quarter of the U.S.'s. Yeah. Like, I mean, filling billionaire pockets, I suppose. Yeah, it's an extraction process. And that's exactly what you've hit, Ligandese, right? Like, there is a certain degree of actual utility that happens there, certainly, right? Like, we'll actually build the bombs, we'll actually do all this kind of stuff, yabba yabba, right? But I'm more or less of the opinion that the military budget is essentially just an extraction process. That it's just a way to justify enriching these total psychos. Like, they need war to exist so that these missiles can get used, right? And because once the missiles are used, then they can get a bunch of money replacing them, right? So it's like a little cycle that fundamentally the American economy isn't actually much different than go to a city and drop bombs on it, so pay to have all the bombs done, and then bring in your construction crews, take over whatever natural resources exist in the region, pay to rebuild it, right? And then bomb it again. So you have like a little cycle, right? And where do you get the tax monies from to do it? From the people you're bombing, Like it's a deadly cycle of that is psychopathic. Like it's a nightmare psychopath culture that we're dealing with. We live in a death cult. This is, and I'm starting to see people really start to wake up to it. Like, when I say this, I'm not being glib. Like, I'm not being, yeah, it's a death cult. No. By any definition that you can find or put in front of your face of what a death cult is, America is that. It worships a non-physical entity called money, right? It worships a concept and an idea called money that it uses to justify extermination and death throughout the world. And once it comes to a point where it's unable to do that in the world, it will do it to itself, right? It will do it to itself. That's why America is not responding rationally to the climate change crisis, because fundamentally, America is looking forward to it. Like, all of our media is about it. All of our media is this post-apocalyptic stuff. And when Americans see this Mad Max shit, right, when they see this kind of stuff, they don't think, boy, we got to do everything we can to stop it. They think, I would do really well in that situation. That's what Americans say, right? They don't say, man, it would be horrible to live in this Mad Max world. We should do everything we can to prevent that. We should do everything we can to avoid that future. No, they go, if I was in that situation, I would have the best guns, the best armament, I would be surrounded by the best people, I would be the best. So there's this kind of longing for it that exists within the American ethos. Because it's a death cult. They want it. That's that when they make these post-apocalyptic movies, they're not warnings for the future. Right? They're longings for the future. That the reason why we're not making movies about a more advanced civilization actually finding peace and all of this is that that's not what people want. People want war and death and destruction. That's why all of our movies are like that. Take a look at a movie like The Purge, for Christ's sake. Right? The Purge is literally a society that says once a year, let's just make all crime legal. And so people start purging the society. That's like a dark, like, evil impulse that exists within the soul of American empire. This idea that, like, our society would somehow improve if only we purged people occasionally. And so how do you think that would go? Right? How do you think that would go? Right? Oh, you think that there would be like big neo-Nazi groups that would go into Jewish communities and just do a mass murdering and a mass cleansing on this day where purging is acceptable? Like, this is the films that we're making. This is what we're doing in this society. Uwan, good to see you, bud. Adam, good to see you too, man. The power of quantum computing in relation to hacking, how I think of it, is not a matter of faster. It's that it can try all possibilities of your password at once, essentially. Multiverse. That's a cool idea, dude. That's a super cool idea. That just, like, it doesn't need to, like, run it and then run it again and then run it again and then, like, take time. It's just like, and it's done. That's an awesome thought. Extinction Rebellion implied Harris and Biden were leftists, while they said some leftists said they wouldn't get vaccinated under a Trump presidency. I mean, I think Americans are just desperate. Honestly, like when Noam Chomsky came out and said vote for Biden because at least he might be responsive to the climate change catastrophe. It's just total acts of desperation, if you ask me. That the average American citizen still wants to believe that it is at all possible that these issues are going to be resolved by checking a box on a ballot. That's really fundamentally what's happening in America. That there's still a lot of people who have deluded themselves into believing that electoral politics is going to work. Like, I saw a clip recently that was circulating the internet of Destiny, right? Who's like a fairly prominent liberal streamer, who, as far as I'm concerned, is utterly naive and delusional in this regard. That he genuinely is arguing that electoral politics and the American system of democracy is the best system, while it's literally generating an apocalypse. So we're facing utter delusion in the liberal class. Like it's no different than what's happening on the right, where they believe Jesus Christ is coming back at the same time. It's the same kind of magical thinking that these overt, crazed, murderous psychopaths will actually respond to the needs of the populace if we just vote harder, right? It's absolute madness. It's absolute madness. It's why something like Russiagate works, right? Like, instead of the response in the narrative when Hillary is defeated by Trump, instead of the narrative being like, hey, why did that happen? We should actually ask people and like take very seriously like what occurred that allowed Trump to be seen as a viable option compared to someone like Hillary, right? And if you had have actually asked that question, you might have gotten responses like, hey, Bill Clinton was responsible for spreading more poverty and misery than any other American president in the modern era. They might have got responses like, hey, Hillary Clinton like was the Secretary of State when we destroyed Libya. Like, we might get responses that would be difficult for the Democratic base to actually hear, and could actually alter the way that they think. But instead of that, it was Russia's fault. Russia went in there and did a thing, and they stole the election. Like, and for whatever reason, in like American parlance, or in American media, in the American mindset, that's not seen as exactly the same as what's going on in the Republican base right now, right? Like, the Republican base, huge sections of it say that Trump had the election stolen from him, right? Well, that's essentially what the Democrats were saying for forever, right? That the Democrats were basically saying that the election was stolen from Hillary. That was the whole ethos and the whole impetus of Russiagate. And you can still find these people walking around. So, like, the conspiracy brain and the naivety and the childishness that we all point at the Christian theocracy and say how guilty they are. Well, all of that exists in the Democratic Party too, right? That what we're facing is a mass cultural issue. That the Democrats and the Republicans are allies. They've been completely co-opted by power, that the structure of American democracy itself was always designed to function this way, right? It was always designed with the idea that that power stays in the wealth of the nation. And it can't possibly respond to anything but. It can't operate differently than this. It's like you want a thresher to suddenly act like a car, right? Oh, they both have wheels, right? It's just not the same. It's just not going to do the same thing, right? It's like you're asking like a hammer to suddenly operate like a pair of pliers or something. It's just not going to work that way. It's not how it's going to go. The system is designed to be this way, and this is what you get. John, you said the Canadian government spends more on horses than the homeless. It's a very powerful statement. Could you share your source? Have I ever said this? I don't remember actually saying that, first of all. More on horses. I don't remember when I said that or the context of it, Mock. I'll look around for it. Here. Let maybe Google will spit it out. Canadian government spends more on horses than houses. Oh, here you go. The horse industry combined contributes more than $19 billion annually to the Canadian economy. Oh, wow. The economic contribution from horses in Canada. Here you go. We could suddenly become like an equestrian channel. The whole thing could just be about horses from now on. What do you guys think? Should we take a horse pivot? Right? We should take a horse pivot and suddenly just be all about horses. We could put up pictures of horses and I'd be like, that's a fine looking horse. What a good looking horse that is, right? Nice tail, good hair, right? Oh, this one's got a nice canter, right? And I'd be here for 3 hours a night, bred in horses, 3 hours a night, and we'd be talking all about horses and horses are an important part of the Canadian economy. They contribute $19.8 billion to the Canadian economy. On-farm activities with horses generate 76,000 full-time jobs. Average salary rate of $29,884. You know, as climate change begins and fossil fuels become obsolete, we could all just go back to horses, you know. There was a period of time in Canadian history where horses were the main way of getting around. It was either you had a horse or you took the rail. Well, I say here at Canadian Horses, we should get back to our roots. A horse for every person and a bale for every horse. What do you guys think? Huh? Is that the content? That's the content? I think that I'd be very popular. I think that there would be like a good amount of like rural folk out in the world. Every day I'd be talking to one of the primary objectives of this research study was to identify the economic contributions to the Canadian economy derived from the national horse industry. The unique element of the horse industry is the economic contribution that makes us both an agricultural production center and a sports recreation activity sector. Livestock production in the context of the horse industry is production targeted to used markets. Used markets for horses include a wide range of market segments: working horses and ranching, working horses for youth and adult amateur sport, high-performance horses used for international sports and racing, and horses used for pleasure, riding, or leisure, recreational activities. I remember me and Betsy Lou, we met on the horse range back during the Calgary Stampede. And God bless her, she was dressed in a bonnet that made her look like a young filly, I tell you what. Yeah, that what a great character, right? What a great character. This guy right here, I could be this guy for a little bit of time. He seems like a good man, you know. A good man with a good mustache, wears a cowboy hat, cares about his family, cares about the people around him, cares about what it means to be a Canadian farmer out in the Canadian prairies. Now, I don't much care for this Trudeau fella. I think that he's not doing much to help us out here. This carbon tax is making things more difficult for everybody out here in the Alberta plains. What we need is we just need to open up that market, you know? You open up that market and we'll be able to ride down it as fast as a filly finding her feet. I like him. There's something honest about this guy. I like it. We do like to have fun here on the Canadian Commie, right? We do like to have fun here on the Canadian Commie. This is the content that you guys are tuning in for sure. I could just picture some of you guys are sitting out there being like, what the fuck is happening? What the fuck is this shit? Never mind all this communism stuff. Yep, focus on the capitalist death cult aspect. Remove the shackles. Like, dude, like, even when I was at the protest, people were saying to me, like, there was, like, a young girl, I was listening in to what she was saying, and she was like, I don't really support socialism, because socialism's like communism light. And I'm like, you're literally in the middle of an apocalypse. That's going to be the wildest part, right? These people who are, like, literally experiencing firsthand an apocalypse, saying that capitalism is the best system. It's wild. It's wild. America wants an apocalyptic event to happen. As a black American myself, our psychopathic leaders could care less about their own lives as long as they continue to endlessly feed their dark desires. Yeah, I mean, we're onto something with that one. Like we have no rooting in our emotional selves as emotional creatures, right? And the absolute worst offenders for this, for people who cannot get in touch with their own emotional selves, are these, like, rural Republican types, right? Like, all emotions just need to be bottled up and pressed down and suppressed, right? Like, that's how they do it. And it's devastating. If you can't actually wrestle with your emotional self and how you are in the world, well, then you're ruled by them. That they are going to take over, and they are going to be the thing that actually dictates how you operate in the world, primarily. Because your only awareness of them is in order to stifle and suppress them. But it doesn't actually work that way, right? What you end up with is you end up with a bunch of detached, highly emotional snowflakes who are being ruled by their emotions while simultaneously pretending as though they're manly men who know what's going on in the world, right? Just take a look at someone like fucking Peterson. Like, just take a look at someone like Peterson. Like, Peterson's completely ruled by his own emotions. Like, he's not actually operating on an intellectual level most of the time, right? He's mainly being dragged around by his emotional state. And his emotions include things like girls are bad, right? Trans people are gross, right? Like, just these odd little emotional statements that he makes. Because he doesn't know how to handle his own his own emotions, which, I mean, probably has something to do with his schizophrenia, but that's okay. Fitting, since equestrians were the nobility class of the Roman Empire. Oh, there we go. Horses contribute manure to mushrooms. There you go, Grinning. Thinking of the important stuff, right? We got to think about these mushrooms. Mushrooms might be the thing that saves us all in the end, you know? The Canadian equestrian. I like it, Major. I like it. Good to see you, bud. You could have a who is hung like a horse segment. Oh. Uphold horsey thought. Horses used for pleasure, guys. It's funny to think that we'll all go back to the horse and buggy, and then all the horses die in a heat wave. I actually think it's more likely that we will... we will ultimately bite the bullet and start putting in, like, rail systems, things that actually run on solar power and solar energy. The question is, like, how horrible is the environment going to be while we're doing that kind of stuff, right? Like, it's to me, it's more likely that we will, like, instead of reverting back to horses and things like this, like, that'll be something that happens for, like, really rural communities, like communities that are very disconnected, which it's going to be difficult to be that kind of community in the future, right? Like, it's going to be very difficult to have that kind of self-sustaining position, to make enough food for yourself, by yourself, for your community, right? And to also have the power you need, and to also have these kinds of things, right? It's going to actually be quite difficult. If possible at all. Like, if we have no contemplation of what is coming for us. Like, that's the thing that I think people... It's so beyond our comprehension that many people kind of loop back around on it and just go, well, it can't be that bad, right? That it's so huge, it's too big, right? It's like a person attempting to identify an elephant, but all they can look through is like a paper tube, right? And they're right up against the elephant. Like, you'd never actually be able to see what the elephant is because you have such a small, narrow picture of it. And it isn't until you take the step back and you put down the tube and actually look at the creature that you can see it for what it is. And something like climate change, I think it's too big. It's just too big for many people that they don't know what it is. And the real crime of it are the people who lied about it, right? And we know who they are. Like, it's one thing, I think, to, like, if we as a society had have been confronted with this issue and had have said, okay, like, we need to make these transitions, we need to make these decisions, we've got to move forward. And if we had have made those decisions and moved forward that way and still lost, I think we would be a happier people. I think we would still be saying, like, okay, yeah, the earth is powerful, it's eating us up, we're doing everything we can to try and mitigate this. I think we would still be in kind of a state of angst and anxiety and depression and despair over it, but I think we would be happier. I think there would be a broader sense of solidarity. But what has happened in this society is that we have multi-billion-dollar organizations, the primary beneficiaries of the fossil fuel industry, who have lied to us about it and are still lying to us about it, right? And we know who they are. We have documents that have written it down. Like, these people should go to jail. Very, very straightforward. U.S. Senator James Inhofe of Oklahoma, right? Famously, repeatedly called climate change a hoax. This man should be in jail. There's no other place for him to be, right? It's like standing up and saying that the Nazis don't exist, right? Like, we have all of the evidence you could possibly imagine. Dr. Wei Hock-Soon, Smithsonian contracts. This is a hoax that was done through the Smithsonian, right? This man should be in prison. Like, there's no other place for someone like this to be. Like, standing up and denying what is happening in climate change, and dismissing it as unimportant, right? Yeah, Cole's Information Council on the Environment. Everyone involved in this should be in prison. Everyone involved in that should be in prison. It's this enormous scam that deception by the American Legislative Exchange Council. Like, we've got huge organizations who are literally being funded by multi-billionaires to just lie about it, right? To just completely tell utter falsehoods about this. And we're all supposed to, accept it? We're all supposed to just be like, oh, that's okay, free market, ideas. No. Because what happens if you create a society of deception like this is that the people who are sub-intelligent, right? And I'm not trying to say that to insult them, but just to acknowledge their existence, which never happens in our society. We never acknowledge the existence of sub-intelligent people except to mock them, like The Daily Show does, for example, where they send a correspondent out and they talk to people who are obviously sub-intelligent, and then we all go, ho, 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 I can't believe that person still thinks Trump is the president. Ho, 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 right? There's a long history of laughing at people with mental illnesses in America, right? And something like The Daily Show, like a classic liberal institution, is no different. But if you've created a climate of deception, right? If you've created a climate where billionaires are just allowed to spew lies into the society, well, don't be too surprised if a ton of these sub-intelligent people go along with it, right? That's why they do it, because it works. I don't know what the punishment should be, but it's crimes against humanity, for sure. I mean, if you ask me, like, I'll say this again and again. Like, nobody accepts what I'm about to say. Like, nobody buys what I say. I think these people should be publicly executed. Like, and I'm not saying that from a sense of rage or any of that kind of stuff. I think that we would be doing the future of humanity a true solid if we took these psychopathic, genocidal nightmare monsters and showed the entire world and history what happens to them, right? that at the end of the Harry Potter franchise, Harry Potter didn't like lock Voldemort in shackles, right, and then put him in a prison cell. At the end of at the end of the Star Wars franchise, Palpatine didn't like have a trial and go to prison and have like fingers waved at him and then spent the rest of his life in like Jedi jail or whatever, right? We should have a trial. We should have an enormous trial, and we should publicly execute these people for their crimes. Like it's beyond treason what they're doing and what they have done. It's beyond treason. Like treason is a betrayal of the people who are alive and of the society that exists as it stands. What these people are doing is a betrayal of not only the people who are currently alive, but of every future generation. Like, it's beyond treason. It's a massive crime against humanity, what they're perpetrating. And I respect and understand, like, and I'm absolutely positive that there are many of you out there who are thinking, sounds like a bit much, John. That's a bit authoritarian, bit over the top. That's fine. We can disagree on that, and that's fine. My position, and what I will always say, and what I will always believe, is that these people should be put on trial, and they should be publicly executed. We should gather around them and watch them be executed, so that we understand it. This clean. There's no clean way to deal with these overt, crazed, manic, depraved psychopaths. Like, these people are psychotic, and they're trying to destroy our children and our children's children. I don't accept that, like, we'll wag our finger and put them in a cell. No. They don't get a country club vista view, right? They don't get to participate. We don't get to spend money to keep them comfortable as they go off into old age. Fuck all of that. Fuck all of that. Yeah. It is a worse crime than treason against your country. It's treason against everyone. Everything. It's pretty much one, if not the worst kind of crime you can do. Yeah. Like, the devastation that climate change is already going to cause. Like, if we suddenly did right now, if everybody on the planet suddenly went, like, if aliens came down from the skies and said, hey, whoa, monkeys, you are going to blow your shit up if you keep doing this. Stop. Here's a new technology that gives you perfect clean energy forever. That just like blazes out into the world, right? If aliens suddenly manifested this technology that was clean, that did all of this kind of stuff, we would still be facing massive catastrophes, right? And there isn't a single scrap of evidence to show that the Americans and the Canadians are at all interested in preventing these catastrophes. We are hurtling towards them at a rapid pace. If anything, we're picking it up. Like, recently you had like, $2 billion, like some $2 billion bill come out of the Democrats for climate change. They're going to plant some trees or something. But we all know what's going to happen to that money. It's all just going to get pocketed because it's complete corruption, right? These Americans are corrupt. By their very definition, they're corrupt. None of the money that is going to go into any climate change pursuit or project in America is actually going to be used for that purpose. Because it's not how American politics works, right? It's all theatrics. It's all for show. So they'll take $2 billion and shuffle it off over to these people who will then put up like, I don't know, some kind of like solar panel array that doesn't work, call it a success, take a picture of it, take the money and pocket it. That's what Americans have been doing this whole time. If you watch Planet of the Humans, right? It's a documentary from Michael Moore, right? If you watch Planet of the Humans, that's essentially the process that he captures. he captures this process of environmental groups basically just taking money, putting up worthless projects that don't achieve anything, and then pocketing the rest of the money, right? Like, our society and our system is a failure. It does not work. It is the opposite of functional. Speaking of something that's the opposite of the functional, enjoy an ad. I hate to do it. Most of so-called Canada will never be close being connected to a train system. I mean, we already have a train system. But I see what you're saying. Horses, donkey, mule, or bust. We've got to focus on transition towns and living locally as opposed to huge transit systems. Yeah, I mean, but none of, like, I don't see any evidence that any of that is actually happening, right? Like, quite the opposite. That it's conservative rulers more than anything that are making it so that, like, instead of like 10,000 or 50,000 people being governed by a municipal organization here in the city of Toronto, now it's getting to be like 200,000 people, and this is all being done to quote unquote cut costs. When we all know it's what's being done to secure power, right? That if one person is responsible for 200,000 people, well then they're only really going to respond to the most powerful people in the society. Right? And the most powerful people in the society are the psychopaths with the most money. I don't normally condone judging books by their covers and that kind of thing. But you take one look at Pelosi and how she non-answers any question on Insider Trader. And she's guilty and knows it, yeah. But it doesn't matter. Like, that's just it. It doesn't matter. Like, I don't know why they don't just tell the truth now about these things. Like, John Bolton literally went on national television and confessed to organizing international coups. Nothing happened, right? Nobody came and arrested him. Like, nobody's going to press charges or anything, right? Like, it has no effect on his position. It has no effect on what's going to happen to him in the future, right? Like, I don't understand why someone like Pelosi doesn't just say straight out, like, yeah, I took my information that I get from being in Congress and I used it to make a lot of money. What are you going to do? And because nothing would change. Like, what would change for Nancy Pelosi? Well, you think that any organization is actually going to come after her? You think that any meaningful thing is going to actually occur to someone like Nancy Pelosi? No, of course not. The system is far too corrupted for that to occur. Like, for fuck's sakes. Like, we literally discovered an island where wealthy and powerful people would go to have sex with children organized by like a pedophile who had already been incarcerated once before, right? We know that people like Donald Trump, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton were on the flights to go to this pedophile rape island. Like, we know that this place existed. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently doing prison time. Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide about it. Moreover, we know for a fact that Ghislaine Maxwell gave over a list of people who went to this island, who she sold these services to. And they refused to release that information. The fact that they are refusing to release that list should tell you everything you need to know about the American power structure and how it works. That the very people who are supposed to be responsible for prosecuting these people and for pursuing these people and arresting these people and bringing these people to justice are protecting these people. That people like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell are pawns for these people to get what they want. And in this particular case, what they want is an island full of children they can rape. That exists. That's what they want. That's the society they want to create and have created and likely are continuing to create. And this idea that Nancy Pelosi or John Bolton or any of these kinds of guys will face any kind of consequences for openly confessing these sorts of crimes, it's a joke. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Like, there's no one within the structure of the system that's actually going to do that. And should anyone even attempt it, they'll just get chased out of the system. Or get suicided. Yeah, Assange, Snowden, heroes branded as criminals, upside down and backwards clown society. Yeah. No, we're an inverted people. That most of what we believe is wrong. Like, chances are good if it's coming out of the American power structure, you can just take the opposite position and you'll be right. Most of the time, you'll be right. Because, like, there's nothing left here. Speaking of, Bank of America memo revealed. We hope conditions for American workers will get worse. This is from The Intercept. The financial behemoth privately fears that regular people have too much leverage. A Bank of America executive stated that we hope working Americans will lose leverage in the labor market in a recent private memo obtained by The Intercept. Making predictions for clients about the U.S. economy over the next several years, the memo also noted that changes in the percentage of Americans seeking jobs should help push up the unemployment rate. The memo, a mid-year review from June 17th, was written by Ethan Harris, the head of global economics research for the corporation's investment banking arm, Bank of America Securities. Its specific aspiration: by the end of next year, we hope the ratio of job openings to unemployed is down to the more normal highs of the last business cycle. The memo comes amid a push by the Federal Reserve to cool down the economy, informed by much of the same rationale, that high wages are driving inflation. This year, the Fed has increased interest rates for the first time since 2018. Historically, this has often caused recessions, and that is exactly what appears to be happening now. The Commerce Department reported Thursday that the gross domestic product has fallen for the second quarter in a row, indicating that a recession may already have begun. Parts of the mid-year review, in particular its emphasis on a looming recession, received press coverage at a time of the memo's release to clients. This is the first publication of the document in full. What the memo calls the ratio of job openings to employment is generally calculated the other way around, i.e. the ratio of unemployed people to job openings. The more widely used ratio offers one measurement of balance of power between workers and employers. The lower this number, the more options unemployed people have when searching for work, and the greater opportunities employed people have to switch jobs with better pay and conditions. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, this ratio stood at 0.5 as of May, meaning that when there were 2 job openings per unemployed person. In 2009, at the worst moments of the economic calamity that followed the collapse of the housing bubble during the end of the George W. Bush administration, the ratio climbed as high as 6.5, so there were more than 6 unemployed workers for each open job. Then it slowly declined over the next decade, reaching 0.8 in February 2020, before the COVID-19 lockdowns began. This recent unusual moment of worker leverage made Bank of America quite anxious. The memo expresses distress about a record-tight labor market, stating that wage pressures are going to be hard to reverse. While there may have been some one-off increases in some pockets of the labor market, the upward pressure extends to virtually every industry, income, and skill level. The memo recalls a previous Bank of America memo in 2021, which it says warned of very strong momentum in the labor market, suggesting the economy would not just hit, but blow through full employment. Fast forward to today, and these trends have been worse than expected. The memo is an uncanny demonstration that the economist Adam Smith was right when he described the politics of inflation in his famed 1776 work, The Wealth of Nations. High profits tend much more to raise the price of work than high wages, Smith argued. Our merchants and master manufacturers complain much of the bad effects of high wages and raising the price. They say nothing concerning the bad effects of high profits. They are silent with regard to the pernicious effects of their own gains. They complain only of those of other people. Thus, exactly as Smith would have predicted, Bank of America complains loudly about the bad effects of high wages and raising prices, but appears to be silent about the pernicious effects of high profit. This is especially remarkable, given the role that corporate profits have played in the recent increase in inflation. After-tax corporate profits stood at 8.1% of the economy at the beginning of 2020, but have since shot up to as high as 11.8% of the GDP. In an economy the size of the US, that equals an increase of more than $700 billion in profits per year, these higher corporate profits have been the cause of over 50% of recent price increases. Instead, the memo is focused on the enticing prospect of the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, slowing the economy, and bludgeoning workers back into line. The perspective of working Americans would generally be exactly the opposite. For most of us, it's fantastic to have lots of jobs available, with employers competing for you. A tight labor market is wonderful. Wage pressures are great. From this viewpoint, the key issue right now would be how to lower inflation while keeping employment and worker power high. Such a tack would include full-bore attempts to lessen supply chain issues and reduce the pricing power of big corporations. Most interesting of all is that in Bank of America's enthusiasm for the Fed going on the attack against working people, it gets the basic facts wrong. Wage pressures have turned out not to be, as the memo claims, hard to reverse. If you did see continually accelerating wage growth, it would be a problem, Dean Baker, a senior economist at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, a liberal Washington, D.C. think tank, told The Intercept in an email. That would almost certainly mean a wage price spiral with even higher inflation. However, nominal wage growth has slowed sharply from around a 6.0% annual rate to just over 4% in recent months. So, Bank of America wants the Fed to raise rates and unemployment to attack a problem, accelerating wage growth, that doesn't exist in the world. The memo therefore tells us what we suspected all along. The most powerful economic actors in the U.S., entities like Bank of America and its clients, do not like working people to have power. But it's nice to have it in their own words. Harris, the author, was not available for comment. It's becoming obvious, isn't it, that there is a perpetual, endless class war that does exist in North American society, and it is the war that was identified by Marx, by communists, that it is a war of the bourgeoisie against the proletariat, against the owners and the owned. That there is a parasitical group that do no work, that provide no value, that offer nothing tangible to the society, who take in the vast majority of the profits of our labor, who do everything they can to ensure that the working class, the people who actually generate the profits, the people who actually do the work, the people who are actually responsible for building the society that they parasite, that they parasticize, have no power. Right? This slave society that these people want to live in needs to be under constant control. And it's becoming more and more apparent and obvious to anyone who has even a casual glancing look. And it's stories like this that make me deeply, deeply skeptical of when I see stories like this, why a universal job guarantee beats a basic income pipe dream, right? I've been saying for 10, 15 years now to be very skeptical of a society such as this promoting something like a universal job guarantee. Doesn't that just sound like slavery? Just the state telling you what to do, where to go, what to make. You don't even have the opportunity to say no to employment anymore because you have a job guarantee, right? Sounds to me like they're trying to erect a slave system and a slave society, pretty clearly. And they're calling it a job guarantee. Oh, you're guaranteed to have a job. See, we're nice. We're ensuring that you have a way to contribute to the society, right? That you'll get a job and work that job as a guarantee. And if that falls through, then we'll find you another job, right? So, sounds like pretty basic slavery to me. Like no steps at all in this slave society. How about the investor class goes and does some of this work? How about the investor class actually do something worthwhile? Exactly, Matthias. Slave role guaranteed. Not only done through the power of economics, right? Not only reinforced economically and through the structure of our cultural society, but now legally guaranteed, built into the system itself. A recreation of systemic slavery built into the structure of our society through the power of law and enforced through the violence of the state. This kind of stuff, like, we should be very, very, very skeptical of this. This idea that, capitalism just wants to give you a universal job guarantee. Yeah, right? Just like it gave, like, black slaves a universal job guarantee. Yeah, if you were a black slave living in the States, or a prisoner, right? If you're a prisoner in the States, you got a job guarantee, for sure. There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. Warren Buffett. Yep, good to see you, Incisive. Good to see you. Yeah, sounds like slavery with extra steps to me. It's not even extra steps. That's the funniest thing. Like, it's not even extra steps. It's straight slavery. Like, it's straight just like you work for, but instead of working for, like, an independent, like, plantation owner or whatever, right? You work for the state. Like, it's just creating a class of slaves is what it is. And like, let's take a look at that. I just want to get to the conclusion of this. While it remains to be seen whether a sensible and practically implemented universal jobs guarantee program can be implemented in Canada, building on existing programs that have already proven to work is a good place to begin, right? Oh, hey, Austria announced they were running the first universal jobs guarantee experiment, right? Yeah, good old Austria. Nothing bad has ever come out of Austria, right? Now, Austria, completely like a bastion of progressive thought, right? You know what? I am going to read this, just because I feel like shitting on it. With the current cost of living crisis resulting in dramatic inflation, higher interest rates, and a looming recession, people have been searching for solutions to the economic crisis. Daniel Sy has a solution: slavery. A universal job guarantee may be the answer we're looking for, especially since Canada lost 43,000 jobs in June. While most people are familiar with the idea of a universal basic income, the notion of giving every citizen a basic income, irrespective of their income level or need, few are familiar with the idea of slavery. Instead of a guaranteed fixed income, Slavery policies provide jobs and wages. I'm literally replacing universal job guarantee with the word slavery. And see how it makes sense, right? See how it sounds exactly the same, right? Slavery policies provide jobs and wages to people who aren't able to find work on their own. In theory, slavery could help stabilize inflation by providing stable full-time employment, addressing unemployment, enhancing economic productivity, and reinforcing price stability, right? Makes sense. Slavery programs are crucial for a number of reasons. They keep people in the labor force, alleviate poverty, improve health and well-being, add meaning to people's lives, and help the most vulnerable. They also provide crucial non-monetary benefits that have historically been associated with universal basic income, including improvements to health, education, social cohesion, and productivity. Economic stabilizer. There are a few unique barriers that undermine universal basic income and its ability to be implemented. As we have seen with the government support programs related to COVID-19, government stimulus in the form of direct cash can cause inflation. Yet, as long as you ignore the fact that we created that money out of thin air and then didn't tax it away, right? That's what's causing the inflation. That we created the money and we didn't tax it away. That's how it works. It's just pooled up in the hands of the billionaire class. These programs reduce the supply of lower skilled employees in the job market. Source required. Let's see a source. Is it going to be a painful pandemic wages and business subsidies will eventually stop? Okay, so he's just linking to another article. Whatever. This guy sounds like a total fucking simp and a complete loser. As some people invariably decided to stay at home rather than to work. And notice how they say this. As some people invariably decided not to catch COVID. Not to go out in the midst of a pandemic rather than to work. Like the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, universal basic income might take away the incentive to work for some. Literally no evidence that this is the case, but that's okay. Just keep lying, right? Just reinforce the lie and keep saying the lie over and over and over again. We've actually run the studies, right? The studies have been run. A basic income does not reduce people's incentive to work. It shifts their incentives to pursue other forms of work that are not beneficial to the capitalist psychopath class. This would result in a vicious cycle, blah, 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 blah. I don't need to repeat the lie. The effect of cash stimulus without controls can be far-reaching. To take the resulting stream out of the economy, what do you expect of an advocate for slavery, right? In contrast, slavery would generate revenue for the government through taxable income, thereby reducing the cost of the program while simultaneously enhancing other sectors of the economy, such as the environment or infrastructure. It would ensure that people are able to earn money and therefore are able to spend money, because the basic income doesn't give people money to spend. Slavery. More politically feasible. Slavery usually is more politically feasible. Part of the reason why universal basic income hasn't been successful in Canada is because it hasn't been championed by any mainstream Canadian political party. A deep, deep shame of the NDP, if you ask me. That the great shame of today's modern NDP is that they are not championing a basic income. The reason why people are not flocking to the NDP and view the NDP as the same as the Conservatives and the Liberals is because they are shamefully not actually fighting for policies that would help Canadians in any meaningful way, right? On the contrary, slavery would be more appealing to voters because it addresses labor shortages while guaranteeing minimum wage. Considering there are already programs that help people find fulfilling jobs, it isn't too much of a stretch to imagine a scaled-up version run by the federal government. Consider Canada's summer student work programs, where the Canadian government subsidizes businesses to hire students, or other employment programs, such as building infrastructure to last generations, or tree planting. A universal job guarantee, slavery, would build on these established programs and be more likely to garner political support based on precedent. A path towards slavery. People want better jobs and a consistent source of income. Economies with full employment operate at their full potential with higher productivity and stability than those with high unemployment. here's the best part about this slave system that this guy's espousing, is that it's essentially a great way to drive wages always down towards the minimum, right? That if you force people into these job programs, the slave system that you're providing, well, who's setting the wage? The government, right? So you can't exactly negotiate against the government, right? Because it's the government. And so what's that going to do to the private sector? It's going to drive wages right down, right? That's what this is all about. It's about creating a slave society to drive wages downward and ensure that everybody has to work for the bare pittance while the ruling class buys up all the assets and charges you more rent than you make in your wage while simultaneously telling you, just get a better job, right? Just get a better job. It's your fault that this is happening. It's your fault that this is happening in this supreme form of ultimate gaslighting, right? So not only are they espousing a doctrine of slavery, they're gaslighting you and telling you that it's your fault that you can't get out of it. When I worked as a senior policy advisor for the government of Canada, the most effective bureaucrats that were able to implement policies were aware of policies and ideology and how governments of the day are driven by them and the likelihood of votes. They knew how to frame good policy within a party's platform to attract voters. Listen to this dweeb, this total nerd, like literally jerking himself off because he's part of a failed system that's generating an apocalypse while defending literal slavery. Like, what a loser this guy is. Just and these are the people who are working in the Canadian government. This fucking dumb, moronic Daniel Sy loser standing in front of us saying that the way to move forward is slavery while patting himself on the back for saying, yeah, I worked for an institution that worked as hard as it could to generate an apocalypse for itself. Like, these are the people who are getting published in the mainstream media. These utter, complete, fraudulent, moronic losers who are actually saying to you, the thing that we should do is listen to the structure that's generating an apocalypse while it tells you to vote for slavery. Like, welcome to Canada. Yep, this bullshit was effective. Therefore, it must be good. Essentially, the types of arguments these people make. Yeah, like, might makes right. Right? Oh, hey, I pulled out a gun and pointed it against the guy's head and he gave me his wallet. Perfect. All right? That's the way to make money. Right? I created a pyramid scheme and suckered a bunch of people into getting involved with affiliate codes and all that kind of stuff. I must be a smart genius, right? Like, that's the Andrew Tate story. Like, we live in a society where something's effectiveness, right, in terms of you getting what you want, matters more than someone's freedom, someone's ability to live in the world, someone's ability to have stability, any of this kind of stuff. Like, what this guy wants is he wants to be able to go get a latte and go to brunch, right? He wants to have a service sector that jerks him off and polishes his balls, and he's willing to erect a slave system in order to do it. It's pretty basic shit, right? Like, this is the fraudulent nature of our society, that we genuinely do not care about basic shit, like basic shit, and if we do stand up and say we care about it, our solutions are like literally slavery. Yeah, just delete landlords already. Yeah. One would assume that would be a good first start. Like, landlords provide no value whatsoever. Like, they have the same economic benefit to our society as a ticket scalper does, right? It's the same process, it's the same idea, it's the same concept. Hey Tinker, how you doing? They're on purpose increasing unemployment. They know it's not really bringing down inflation. I mean, I'm more or less of the opinion that they're just doing everything they can to bring chaos in, right? Like, they just they don't want anybody to be able to find their feet. They don't want anybody to be able to gain any kind of stability. And the only way that you can have stability is by total subservience, right? It seems to be the only thing these people care about anymore. Let's get rid of this. Trudeau's disapproval rating at highest level since becoming a prime minister. Yeah, that took a bit of time. Right? It took a bit of time for people to realize that this guy's just a foofy-haired moron. Right? That's why he got that dumb haircut, right? He got the dumb haircut so that everybody would be like, oh, he's not a foofy-haired moron, right? Now he just looks like a moron. A new Abacus Data survey shows that the disapproval of the federal government sits at 51%, the highest since Trudeau was first elected. 51% of people surveyed also have a negative view of Trudeau. If the election were held now, the Conservatives would win 35% of the vote share, with the Liberals forming the opposition with 30%. The NDP came in at 19%. Like, this is where we're going, right? Conservative lead widens as unhappiness with federal government and Prime Minister Trudeau grows. This is, today, 33% of Canadians think the country is headed in the right direction, which is 8 to 10 points below where things were a year ago. Views of the direction of the world in the United States hit lows since Donald Trump was the U.S. president. So there's Canada. So what this tells me, right, is that Canada is more delusional than the rest of the world in the United States, right? The rest of the world in the United States only has about 17%. So let's say 20% of the society is deluded, right? So, which makes sense, right? When you take a look at the income inequality graph, like if you're in the even 20% of the society that actually has money, that's fooled yourself into believing that everything's going just fine and hunky-dory, right? You can do that. Here in Canada, we're higher than that, right? So we've got about a third of the society is living in a total delusional space. And at this point, you can say pretty clearly that it's utter delusion, right? The system that we have is generating an apocalypse, right? That it not only is it generating a total social collapse, right, through its overt crazed warmongering and extracting of wealth from the society, but it is now generating a legitimate actual apocalypse that is going to have profound effects, not only on us, but on the future of all generations on the planet. 33% of Canadians are like, that's fine, totally normal. Oh, what a great society we live in. Canada's the greatest society that's ever been created in the world. And I go to work at 9 a.m. and I go home at 5 p.m. and I drive 2 hours a day to get there. And I go to watch a Marvel movie and have a great time. And then on the weekend, I go out to the patio and everything's great. Yeah, that's their life, right? This just deluded, detached, childish view of how the world is actually going. Like, how can you even look at what's happening in the States with the rising of this overt theocracy, this Christian theocracy, this fascist Christian theocracy that's coming and rising into place? Like, it's going to be astounding to see. Remember when Idiocracy came out, like-minded people were like, well, I'm not having kids either, so who's influencing kids? Their parents? Right-wing people who are out reproducing the left. Yeah. I mean, the actual truth of it is that nobody has any money anymore. Like, that's kind of the bottom line on it, is that the boomer generation, when the millennials started saying, like, I don't have any money, like, I can't have kids, their response was actually like, you'll find the money. That's literally what they said. You make it work, right? You just make it work. Yeah, you just make it work, you know? You just have a kid and you just put it together and you make it work. Yeah. Because they've just been completely detached from what's actually happening in the society, right? That they are essentially living in a dream world called the American dream that was created by their parents, and their parents got it for them through mass protest and struggle, through enormous fighting. And they didn't they didn't recognize the flaw in this idea, which was that it's going to turn their children into perpetual children. That the boomer generation has not been responding rationally to it because it doesn't understand what it takes and refuses to acknowledge it because they haven't really grown up past 6. Like they're just stuck in this kind of perpetual childishness, and so when we say we don't have any money, like it's over. We don't have any money. Like we can't have kids. Like what are you talking about? Like if I were to suddenly have to take care of a child, I would be financially ruined, and it wouldn't be close. Like it wouldn't be like you'll find the money, ha 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 ha. I literally wouldn't be eating food. Like, I literally would not be eating food. Like, I don't know how to communicate these ideas to people who are so deluded and so detached from reality that they actually genuinely believe that children are free. They don't cost any money. And it's especially bad in the United States. It costs something like $10,000 to give birth to a child, right? To go to a hospital, to have a doctor, any of that kind of stuff. Like, people are having kids, real head scratcher. Nobody has any money. It's not hard to figure this out, right? And what's so hilarious about this is that it's actually going, like, the number one thing that is going to destroy the American war machine, the American empire, the American imperial death machine, is the fact that nobody's having any kids, right? China has 1.4 billion people. India has 1.4 billion people. America's got 300 million with a population decline. China's having to put in policies in order to reduce their population, right? They just did something like the one-child policy. They're doing stuff to make sure they don't fucking balloon up and suddenly like exponentially grow to the moon, right? Like they're having to staunch their population growth. And America's doing shit like throwing out Roe v. Wade so that rape victims will be forced to have babies that'll end up being impoverished so that they'll join the fucking military because they have no other option, right? Like eventually they're going to start conscripting prisoners. Like that's what they're going to start doing, is they're going to start saying to prisoners, hey, you can spend, we're going to pick up just a random black guy on the street for having like loose cigarettes or something, right? Oh, that guy's smoking a joint. Let's pick him up off the street, right? Throw him in prison for a life sentence. Or say to him, do a tour in Ukraine or wherever, Xinjiang, right? Wherever they're going to do war. Do a tour in there and we'll let you go free, right? Like these are the systems that are coming in America. Like they're going to do everything they can to maintain the death cult, to maintain the empire, and while they do it, everything they're doing is completely self-destructive, right? It cannot sustain itself. By definition, it simply cannot sustain itself. That they're just simply not going to have the babies. Like they're not going to have the fresh recruits. They're not going to have the children because guess what? No one's got any fucking money, right? Like it's crazy to me that this isn't a constant refrain. That every single thing you hear constantly doesn't come back to nobody's got any money. What do you think? Nobody's got any money. Parents have much less influence on their children today than yesterday. School, free childcare. Parents don't have time to raise their kids at all, nor the ability or anything most of the time. Yeah, exactly. The boomer generation should have been called the I got mine generation. Well, I mean, and to be fair to the boomers, right? Like let's be fair to the boomers. Like they were born into a society that was already fought for, right? That by the time they were being born, their parents had already put in the fight and put in the effort and done all of this kind of stuff. And the boomers, like, the dismantling of that society happened in the wake of the boomers, right? That to many of them, it just happened underneath them. And so when they turn around and they say the insipid, childish things that they say, It's because they don't actually know what has happened, and they can and many of them have come around on this, right? That it has become too obvious. There are too many things that you can point to and just be like, look, the system doesn't work this way anymore. It simply doesn't work this way anymore. And there are infinite things that you can point out. The dismantling of the manufacturing base alone, right? Like if a boomer is still going to tell you, just walk in there and shake his hand and say you're a good worker, right? If that's what he's going to say while the manufacturing base was completely dismantled, then he's just stupid, right? That's all. And that's not a boomer thing. Like there are plenty of stupid millennials and stupid Gen Z and stupid Gen X. Like there's plenty of those people, right? But the boomers have it extra because the society that they lived in no longer exists. And instead of acknowledging that it no longer exists because it was actively dismantled by frauds who lied to them, they're turning around and being like, millennial, no one wants to work these days. No one wants to go get a job. Like, they bring in more Indians, that is their plan. Who's they in that? Sorry, I don't know what they bring in more Indians, that is their plan. Like, I know that here in Canada, part of the response to the labor shortage or the labor crisis is to just expand the temporary foreign worker program, which is an active slave system that exists here in Canada, right? Just get slaves, like go to a country, blow it up and destroy it, right? Do everything you can to spread mass poverty in that society, and then create a program to get those people whose society you just destroyed into your country to pick berries and shit for like $5 an hour, right? It's an overt slave system that we have here in Canada, and we're expanding all the time, constantly. Government approval. Only 34% are diluted, right? So just how we've got 33% delusional up here, we've got 34% who are just completely deluded up here. I don't understand why anyone would actually answer the question. Overall, do you approve or disapprove of the job the federal government led by Justin Trudeau is doing? Oh yeah, he's doing a bang-up job generating this apocalypse. I can't wait until the fire sweeps through my community. Like, take a look at what happened to London. Like, take a look at what happened to London, right? Like, what happened to London? Like, entire city blocks burnt down in London. Like, it was a huge series of wildfires that swept through London. You ever notice how we don't actually see those images? You ever notice how that's kind of been shunted off to the side, right? Yeah, of course it has been, because nobody wants to actually talk about and admit that these wildfires are going to be a big problem for us, like a big fucking problem. And it's because we're generating this apocalypse, and 34% of the society is like, oh yeah, that's great. Like, impressions of Trudeau. See the gap widening. See the gap widening. Right? Again, 31% just total dorks. Like, total fucking dorks. The survey finds 51% offering a negative view of Justin Trudeau, which is the highest number recorded. 31% have a positive impression of Trudeau. A lot of this is straight up still like Justin is my boyfriend kind of thinking, right? Like literally he's so dreamy, like that kind of shit. I still see that shit float around on social medias and stuff. That like Justin Trudeau is like a hunk. And that's it. Like he's like their fucking boyfriend. It's so fucking pathetic. Like, this guy's not your boyfriend, right? He's actively trying to destroy your society and your civilization. That's what he's doing. He's gaslighting you. Very clearly gaslighting you. And you're just taking it. Today. Conservative leadership. We will do more on upcoming release, but it's worth noting that among those who voted Liberal, only 39% have a negative view of Pierre Poilievre, 12% have a positive view. The plurality, 49%, are neutral. towards the presumed conservative frontrunner. Among those on the center of the spectrum, Poilievre is 15% positive, 20% negative, meaning a lot of centrist voters are up for grabs. Centrist is what's used for like just clueless in this context. If an election were held now, conservatives would win 35% compared to 30% of the Liberals and 19% for the NDP. Compared with the last survey, the Conservatives are up 3 points while the Liberals are down 2. The People's Party registers just 4% in this wave, which may suggest the Conservatives are picking up support from the PPC as well as from the Liberals. We've seen lots of polling data that shows that it's Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre is bringing the PPC back into the fold. That there was a great one that we saw that had if Charest was the leader of the Conservatives, the PPC vote basically doubled, right? That it was so high that the PPC might actually get a seat if Charest was the leader of the Conservative Party, which, given the rumblings that are happening within the Conservative Party, could be enough to fracture the party even further, right? That you would see like a genuine breaking up of those two parties. Which, I gotta be honest with you, I'm actually in favor of. I actually think it would actually help Canadians out a lot if the Christian right and the corporate business class actually did fracture and break up from one another. Because then you would end up in a situation where, like, maybe certain issues could be resolved between, like, the corporate business sector and the Liberal Party, for example, right? And that you could see a little bit more inter-party debate and all of this. But voting intention, of course, you got huge support for the Conservatives in the Prairie provinces. What really matters in this upcoming election is if Poilievre can get some seats in Quebec, as you can see, right? It's mainly the Bloc holding down the fort. Quebec and Ontario, the 905, right? Elections here in Canada get decided in the 905. And given our willingness to vote for an overt mafia boss loser who's never worked a day in his life, is just a fat idiot, Poilievre has a good shot. These numbers are a clear signal to the Liberals that many voters, including large numbers of people on the center of the spectrum, are restless. Restless is a fun way to say it, right? Restless is a fun way to say it, right? The Conservatives are highly competitive. Views of Poilievre are more neutral than some might expect, and not very many people feel good about the direction of the country. I just love this restless idea. Like, that's such a great, like, detached rich guy way of saying abandoned. That many people were actually hoping that their politicians would do something. That people would actually look at the apocalypse that's being generated around them and actually go, maybe we should do something more than just ban straws. Maybe we should just, maybe actually try to prevent this apocalypse from happening. According to David Coletto, these results should be a warning sign to the Liberals that they have entered uncharted territory for their government. For the first time in our tracking, 50% or more of people disapprove of the government's job performance. The Prime Minister's negatives have also hit a new high. It is a toxic cocktail when people are unhappy with the direction of the country and they disapprove of the government's performance. That's where we are today. The result is a wider Conservative Party lead and a growing desire for change. Speaking of a growing desire for change, calls in the chat. Let's do it. Let's do it. David Lynch. David Lynch. David Lynch. I'm in with a 7. I'm in with a 7.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's number, I messed up. I thought I hit the button for record, but I didn't. So I drew the number and realized later that it wasn't recorded. I was going to do it again, and get a new number, or possibly the same number, but that wouldn't be correct. The number I really drew today, August 2nd, 2022, was a 3. So today's number is a 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David Lynch. Keeping it honest. Keeping it honest. That's exactly David Lynch. I love it. I love it. 7 still hasn't been called. 7 still hasn't been called. You know what I love about this? I gotta tell you, man. And this makes me love David Lynch. No. He did draw... Okay, so I guess my audio's so fucked up with videos and all that. So let me explain what just happened. He did go through the process of drawing the number, but he forgot to hit record. And he didn't realize that he hadn't hit record. And so he thought to himself, well, maybe I'll just redraw a new number, right? And just hit record and redraw the new number and consider the first number a scrapping. But that wouldn't be right. So he made this video to announce that the real number that he drew was a 3. And so we've just got to trust David Lynch on this, that he did indeed draw a 3. But what I love about this is that is exactly David Lynch to a T. That it's instead of cynically saying like he draws the 3 and then realize, oh, I forgot to hit record. Well, you know what? Fuck it. Right? I'll just put the ball back, hit record, and go through the procedure again. No. That is not correct. That the universe in this moment picked a 3. This number is a 3. God damn it. It matters. It matters, damn it. It matters. And what I like about it is that he's confessing his own error. He's admitting that he made a mistake, and he wants to stay true to the integrity of the project and the universality of the energy that he's bringing and sending out into the world. So, David Lynch. Mwah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for keeping things honest. Thank you, sir, for granting unto us this beautiful gift of just randomly drawing numbers from a jar. What a hilarious thing he's doing, eh? Like, if 20 years ago somebody had told me that I would be reporting on a number draw that David Lynch would be doing, I would definitely be saying, no, that's not going to happen. Like, that sounds stupid. I love it, though. I love it. There's something so beautiful about it, you know? There's something so beautiful about the fact that David Lynch, by his own power and desire to do it, has committed to this idea of drawing a number. China moving a lot of equipment. They may wait for Pelosi to leave, then do what they got to do. I learned my lesson with the Russia-Ukraine, like the Donbass invasion. I was saying before the Donbass invasion, and people still will throw that clip at me, and they're right to do it. I'm not mad about it. I was saying that it's not going to happen. I just didn't think the Americans would allow the Russians to do it, because I still believed that when it came to superpowers, that America would actually commit to diplomacy. I gave America way more credibility than I think that they were due. And the big lesson for me about the Donbass war is that the Americans are actually much stupider. Like, much stupider than I thought. That's sort of the big lesson for me. And why people come and say, like, the whole place is run by globalists. And it's like, nah. Like, there are big power structures, don't get me wrong. But they're dumb. Like they're dumb. Like the people who are operating these things, like they're this cabal, this idea that there's like an orchestrated cabal of people who are like doing all like kinda like certainly there are big institutions that exist. Like certainly there are like piles of money that definitely exist that have lots of influence in all of this. But they're all mainly stupid, right? They're all mainly stupid and do very stupid things. And the invasion of the fact that the Americans didn't just say to the Russians, okay, we'll pull back on all this kind of stuff. Like we'll pull these troops back. Like we understand. Like yeah. Just tells you that like these guys are dumb. And so I don't want to say that it's not possible or that it's unlikely that China will move into Taiwan once Pelosi leaves. But I think my thing with China moving into Taiwan is that there isn't really an impetus. You know what I mean? Like when Russia moved into Donbass, there was an impetus. There was like a thronging desire to move into that region because there was an active war, right? Because the Nazis in Ukraine were shelling Russians in Donbass. That's a pretty like compelling reason, right? That's a pretty compelling reason for a people to want to spur their society into a conflict, right? And that the Russian citizens themselves were whipping Putin in order to get him to move to do this, right? So it had that kind of thing. I understand, but China will look weak if they don't do anything. Look weak to who? Because if it's look weak to America, I don't think that will matter. Xi is in the middle of his leadership review by the Central Committee. Interesting thing to bring up, Victini. Petty politics counts. Petty politics counts, right? It could very well be that Xi is being said, like, we don't know what they're saying to each other. And so for all we know, the Central Committee is saying of this situation, why aren't we doing more about it, right? Starting a war while COVID-0 policies hurt China's economy is a non-starter. Yeah, maybe they look weak in front of his own party in China. That's a really, really good question, actually. I think that I would love to see some polls on that, you know? I'm always very convinced about polling data that comes out of societies. Like the polling data that came out of Taiwan itself about what Taiwan's own people were hoping for its own future was very eye-opening to me, right? Because the Taiwanese people themselves are more or less of the opinion that like what's happening now seems fine. Like that we don't want to be part of this larger body of China, but we don't want to be part of the American empire. That right now they have a kind of cultural independence that isn't official. So the Taiwanese themselves are kind of hoping, and I think that's a naive hope, that both of these superpowers will somehow just leave them alone. I don't think it's going to work that way. I don't think it's going to work that way for them. So I think that they're going to have to bite the bullet and so what that means, like what that's going to tell you, is that no matter which way it goes, the Taiwanese people are going to be upset about it. Have a good one, Radio. Have a good one, Nova Scotia. Good to see you, bud. Further sanctions by Western economies will deep six Xi? I don't think so, dude. I don't think so. Like the what's happening is as these sanctions begin, like the sanctions that the West are putting on Russia are backfiring, right? Like that's kind of what that's what I'm seeing, is that it's chasing Russia into the... Let's do the thing that we love to do. Let's do the thing that we love to do. What do we love to? Open the map. Open the map. Open the map. Let's look at the map. I love looking at maps, man. I think maps are the coolest. So many decisions get made because you're just looking at maps. It's wonderful. China's tech economy depends on semiconductor manufactured in Taiwan. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. So the question is, of course, couldn't they transfer some of that manufacturing onto the mainland, right? Like China is well known for erecting manufacturing. Like if I don't know why China would want to have a section of their economy dependent on something as up in the air as Taiwan. You know what I mean? Sanctions on the level levied against Russia. Well, this is just what I was going to say, right? The sanction regime against Russia has backfired. That it hasn't hurt Russia as badly as it's hurt Europe. That Europeans now, especially you look at like Germany and France, which are dependent on gas coming out of Russia to heat their homes, right? They are going to be facing cold winters. That as the winters settle in across Europe, people are not going to be able to have gas. And why is that happening? Because of the sanctions that were placed on Russia. And that the ruble has bounced back now, that it had a decline, right, which was expected, but it's bounced back now. And what Russia has done is it's joined with China and India and Brazil in an organization called BRICS, which is an attempt to erect a secondary international system. And this secondary international system doesn't care what the Americans sanction, right? That it exists outside of the what's called the international community, but is really the Western community, right? Is really just like the Western bloc. And so I am not confident that sanctions placed against China are going to be that big a deal to China, right? That China is like China has 1.4 billion people, India has 1.4 billion people, Russia has something like 150 million. You take a look at the population of Africa. This is where the majority of the planet's population exists, right? Conversely, the United States, 300 million people, right? It's not that big a deal for these people. Like, it's not that big a deal. IP owned by Western powers, already prohibited to export to China. China is actively increasing chip manufacturing domestically. Thanks, Trump. Yeah. China has always understood that making your own stuff is best. That's why what happened during Deng's market reforms and the shifting of manufacturing from the United States to China, like, the Chinese have got to be giggling about that. Like, we literally dismantled our manufacturing and gave it to China. And genuinely, like, how is that not seen as a national security risk? That, like, you literally can't go to war with China, right? Like, if the United States went to war with China, their economy would collapse. It would happen immediately. All of the shit that we get from China would stop coming. Like, it would be an enormous decline in the living standards of Americans if we went to war with China, right? That's why I think it's so fucking stupid what we're doing with Taiwan and Pelosi and all this shit. Like, I think it pays to remember that the Chinese don't think about these things the way that we do. They do things like plan. They do things like investigate history. They do things like research. They do things like understand the other community that they are dealing with, right? They read books, right? They seek paths of knowledge. They're trying to actually exist and build a stable civilization. So we don't do any of that. right? We're very much just roughshod, draw from the hip. I could have a beer with that guy. Like, oh, you want a plan? That's commie talk, right? Like free market, let chaos reign, all that shit. Like that. So we're very reactive. We're very reactive. This happens, so we do this. Oh, you do that? I do this. That's how we are, right? Like they drew their gun, I draw my gun faster, right? That's how we are. It's not how China is. It's not how China is. That Pelosi visiting Taiwan to us is like, here's our dick. What are you gonna do about it, China? Well, China's response is to just passively look. And we, the babies that we are, go, oh, that makes China weak. What a bunch of weak pussies. And meanwhile, China is just moving forward with its larger plan, right? And Taiwan is part of that larger plan. That China doesn't need to snatch Taiwan. It doesn't need to go in there and go, ha, and make a big thing about it. It really doesn't. Like, unless the Americans literally start moving troops onto Taiwan, like, that's the only thing that China actually needs to respond to, right? That if America starts putting a military base on Taiwan, if America starts bringing troops, military infrastructure, right? If they start actually building stuff on Taiwan, that China must respond to. But the idea that it's going to like reach out and snatch up Taiwan now because Pelosi visited it, I'm less convinced. I'm less convinced. I think that Pelosi's visit is of note. It is interesting. It is definitely something that people in China will talk about. It'll definitely be something that the higher-ups in Chinese society will talk about. I don't think it's going to be the spark that lights the fire, because I think the Chinese are much more patient than that. I do. I think that they are looking at that and being like, yep, that all that does is it confirms their plan. Right? That it doesn't change the plan, but it confirms the plan. And the plan is certainly to gain enough naval power to surround Taiwan, to prevent ships from going through the Strait of Taiwan, and to send a delegation over to Taipei to have them sign documents to confirm that this is a province of China. That's the plan. For certain. That's the plan, and that's what they want. They don't want a big like shelling campaign. They don't want to level Taiwan and have to go in there and enforce their will on Taiwan. They don't want any of that, right? They're not interested in that. I'm more or less of the opinion if that's the solution that China comes up to, they'll just not do it and just kind of continue waiting it out. Because it would be such a disaster on the international stage, right? It would be such a disaster for them, diplomatically. And all of the Western powers forever would constantly just be like, remember Taiwan. That's what they did. They'd make T-shirts that said remember Taiwan, and everybody, like college students, would wear them, remember Taiwan, right? They don't want any of that. So they're playing a much longer game. And I bet you when Xi is being reviewed by the Central Committee, it'll come up, right? But they're not going to look at him and be like, "Why aren't you invading Taiwan, Xi Jinping?" Right? They're going to ask him, "What do you think about what's going on with Taiwan and how can we move forward?" And Xi Jinping will say something along the lines of, "Our plans regarding Taiwan are moving forward, and I think that my predecessor will be the one who's put to the task of finally completing the plan that we have had since Mao," right? Because that's how they view it, right? They're not like us, you know. Their system isn't like ours. Like our system is one of like constant cleansing and smashing and destroying, and like a Democrat comes in and tries to do something, a Republican comes in and destroys it and does his own thing, and then the Democrat comes in and destroys that, and we're just constantly sideswiping and destroying and completing, and then oh, you had this plan and you did this thing, but now I'm going to take that land and this capitalist is going to buy it, and then that's going to go here, and then we're going to requisite it, like and there's no organization, and it's just chaos. It's not how the Chinese are. They're literally like, oh, Mao set this plan out, Deng continued this plan, and we altered it in this way, right? And now I, Xi Jinping, am continuing this plan, and we envision that this plan will resolve itself in this way as leadership is decided down the path, right? So they're building on one another, and they might need to deviate and reassess and move as things occur, but they're not coming in and smashing it and destroying it and building it and then saying, oh, things would be so much better if it wasn't for Mao. Oh, things would be so much better, but Deng fucked it all up. The way that we do, right? How often have you heard a politician here do that? Where it's like, yeah, we're trying to make this, but the last leader was such a catastrophe, right? Like, that's classic politicking. That we consider that normal here. That's not what happens in China. They don't do that. Right? Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. That they view themselves as a continuation. That they are building themselves one upon the other. And if they bring up the legacy of their predecessor, it isn't to say what a catastrophe this guy was, to shift blame away from themselves and try to put it on them. It's to say, well, this is what that guy was dealing with, and he got us to this point. And so that's where I'm operating from, and I got us to this point, right? It's to acknowledge the legacy, not denigrate it. And we here in the West just don't understand that. Like, straight up. Like, we don't understand what it means to have a political class that operates that way, right? And so that lack of understanding means that we project our own society's failings on China constantly. And we're always wrong because we don't understand China at all. We don't understand China even a little. Good to see you, Eric. I hope you're doing well. Can you give a summary of what you covered tonight? The apocalypse is upon us, bud. There you go. IP owned by Western powers already prohibited to export to China. China actively increasing shipment. Yeah, I already read this, but like you said another thing. We'll get to it. Great news yesterday. I was able to go to a walk. First one in a week. I was able to walk more than 20 minutes, and I was able to take out the garbage with an MD before I went to the walk without collapse. Good for you, Eric. Good for you, bud. For those of you who don't know, Eric has been in the chat now for several weeks talking about his experience with long COVID. Right? Important to bring up because now we are getting into more serious situations with monkeypox. Monkeypox has now, California has declared a state of emergency. New York and Illinois has as well. San Francisco already have. So we're seeing more across America. Monkeypox is picking up. And it's important for us to remember these events have real world effects. Eric has been dealing with the effects of long COVID for a long time now. Ended up in hospital over it fairly recently, if I recall. And now telling us, I'm so happy to hear this for you, Eric. These slight improvements, bud, that's how it's going to go. And I hope it just keeps going for you, bud. Because I'm really rooting for you, Eric. Like, nobody wants to be dealing with that bullshit. What random bullshit, right? It's so fucking random what's happening to you. Just literally like a bug came by and now you can't fucking walk. Like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Right? And what's the response from the right in this country and even fucking liberals? Just get a job. Yeah, just work through it, Just go and get a job. You'll be fine. Get fucked. Basically saber-rattling by China, obviously aggregating move to visit Taiwan by American lawmaker Pelosi. Yeah, lots of saber-rattling on this one, for sure. Yeah, Ligandese, I fucking dare them to sanction China. because the sanction against Russia is going really well. Love to see them speedrun the collapse of Western civilization. Yeah, I tend to agree with this perspective. Like, sanctions on China will be self-destructive. Like, we need China more than they need us. I think that's something that we aren't willing to accept. We need China more than they need us. Like, if we sanctioned China and started to do all that, well, that just means that we get less Chinese goods. That just means that all of this manufacturing that's happening in China just doesn't come over here, right? It seems like a total disaster for us. China was the world power for how long in the course of history? Pretty sure they had a powerful empire for quite a while. Oh yeah, I've got a great book. I don't think I have it lying around, but it's just the history of Eastern civilizations, right? And they go through the rise and fall of the many empires that have existed and persisted in China. China has a long history of building up an empire and then falling back into kind of feudal warlordism, right? And then building it up, and it's just constant. It's been a constant refrain in their history. And religious movements or cultural movements or philosophical movements like Taoism, Confucianism have persisted through that period of time. So as the political structure of China is constantly in this build up, back down, build up, back down, there's been a steady building of a cultural understanding throughout China, right? So even as the political apparatus tends to go down, the cultural apparatus remains stable. And so while the people of China may be complaining about these warlords or these guys doing this fucking dumb shit, there's still an understanding amongst the community that brings a certain level of stability and concepts. Like, we have like a cartoonish perspective of concepts like honor, right? Like we'll present China as being very like Klingon in a way, right? Whereas like you bring great honor to your family, that kind of like dumb way of talking about it, because we don't respect or understand ideas like honor at all. Like honor is a severe detriment in Western civilization and Western culture. That if you attempt to be honorable, well, you'll just end up like Eddard Stark, right? Whereas in China, it's something that is taken seriously, right? And Confucianism and these sorts of ideas persist even today. Today I saw an ADHD specialist. He gave me a new prescription. Fantastic, bud. The number was 3 today, Eric. The number was 3. Still no 7. Still no 7. He's teasing us. The exploitation of the labor market in China has put all the IP in their hands to reverse engineer. Yeah. My favorite part about that is that China was very explicit about this. Like, they said straight out, like, yeah, we'll build all your stuff, but we're not going to abide by any copyright law. Like, we're not going to do any of that. Like, yeah, we're going to reverse engineer this stuff. And it's not like the Americans were like giving them the technology and then being like, don't do that or that's a problem. Like, the Chinese were explicitly saying to us, we are going to reverse engineer this stuff and we're going to make it ourselves. And the Americans were like, that's fine, whatever, we don't give a fuck as long as you make it for us. And it's only now, once we realize how stupid that is, that we're going, the Chinese stole it. They stole the Chinese, they stole our technology, they stole our technology, right? Like that, because we're stupid. Because we're dumb. We don't, think, we're not even playing chess. Like, we're playing checkers, right? Like, we're playing, a dumbed-down version of a game that China has already mastered. Opinion, China is just ascending to world power now? Yeah. Like, I mean, in this moment, China has definitely had power within their own region historically, but I'd never say that they were a world power. Because part of the reason for this is that China doesn't want to be a world power. I think this is something that's also not well understood, right? That America's position is, we're the greatest country in the world, and everybody needs to be like us. That's America's position, right? That we are liberal democracy, and we are going to spread liberal democracy throughout the world, and then the world will be better because it will be more like us, right? China's ethos and China's position is, we are the greatest country in the world. Why would we want to go anywhere else? And that's more or less their opinion. That when they go out into the world, they're not going out into the world to be like, you need to be more like us. They're going out into the world because they're saying, hey, you got some shit that we could use to make ourselves better. And if we can make you guys better while we get better, then that's great. That's a win-win situation for both of us. But we're not like, you don't need to be us. We don't care about that at all. Because and if you wanted to get like really oblique about it, because the Chinese would be like, because you can't be like us, we're too cool. Like we're the best, and you're not ever gonna be as good as we are. So don't even try. But that doesn't mean we can't be buddies. But we're definitely the best. And that's a big difference, and not one that's well understood in the West. That China is not attempting to spread its ethos into the world. It's not attempting to spread China. It doesn't want the rest of the world to be China. It doesn't want to create this homogenized oneness of China, right? China is China, and China is the best, and we are the best, and we're going to make it the best, and everything is going to be great. So why would we want that to be anywhere else? Like, well, this is China, and these subtle differences in the way that China views the world as compared to the West. We got to get better at understanding, because like we are in collapse. They are not. Right? And like they're facing challenges, obviously, but it looks to me like they're facing them. You know what I mean? Like, we're not facing our challenges. We're trying to profit from them. Right? We're trying to find a way to turn these disasters into money, because that's what we worship. Whereas China is actually turning and facing into them and saying, okay, this is a challenge for our 4,000-year-old civilization that we need to face. So, but China ascending to a world power now, yeah, that's absolutely the case. That like now is the moment when China is becoming, and the way that they're doing it by building this rail system, the Belt and Road Initiative, this trade system throughout the continent, it's going to be very effective. And it's going to be very, very effective. And America it doesn't know what to do about it. It's in something of a panic about it, if you ask me. Frankly, China should just turn toward Taiwan into a naval base. Summary, imprison separatists and American loyalists. If not that, then China should make it clear that the event in Taiwan becomes an American vassal. They will simply be deleted. Such a move will mean there will be no Taiwan. I mean, China has said as much in regards to Taiwan, that if Taiwan became... Oh, I meant to hit the button and I didn't. Haha, eat an ad! Sorry about that. I don't like hitting that button, but there it is. China has made it clear that if America were to escalate on Taiwan, that China would escalate. So it's said it as clearly as it can. Not that matters. Like, Russia said exactly the same thing in Ukraine, that the coup and all this kind of stuff. Like, Russia was very much like, if you escalate this, we're escalating. Like, we're not going to tolerate this. These are red lines for us, right? And the Americans move forward with it anyway. So, and once again, right, the problem is capitalism, right? They're escalating anyway. All I'm saying is just buy extra pasta, rice, canned goods. Things are going to go up. Dude, tell me about it. I decided today to buy a pizza, right? A pizza that used to cost me $25 now costs me $35. Like, things are going up. Things are going up. I really wish I hadn't got that pizza, honestly. Like, that's a lot of rice that I could have bought for myself. But I wanted to get myself something special. Felt like celebrating today. So this year is the 20th convention of the Communist Party. Happens every 5 years. That's my oh, of course, yeah. That's my basis for the comments in that regard. Yeah, of course. No. Like this convention that you're talking about is an important moment. Like this is when the Chinese reassess their plan. The Communist Party of China, through the National People's Party, through the National People's Congress rather, embark on a 100-year plan. Right? They create a 100-year plan. Because they're a 4,000-year-old civilization, they view 100 years to be actually quite a small time scale. And every 5 years, they reassess the plan, right? And say, are we on track to actually achieve? Can we change the 100-year plan? Should we change the 100-year plan? Is it possible? Are we on a faster time scale than we thought? Are we on a slower time scale than we thought? Is what we're doing useful? And it's this system of sitting down and assessing every 5 years what's going on that is the strength of the Chinese system, in my view. That instead of every 5 years literally sweeping away the ruling class and reinstalling a new ruling class, right? Or forcing a campaign to justify the ruling class existing, they all sit down and go, okay, is it working? Is it happening? What are the pluses? What are the negatives? What can we learn? What are we concerned about corruption? Right? And it's a stronger system than what we do here. And it's going to face its first real test soon, I think, which is, can it survive like an external military invasion? It's shown that it's resilient to financial infection, right? That the threat of of China becoming dominated by Western financiers, that has dissipated. No one takes that seriously anymore. That was always a talking point with Deng. That Deng opened up the markets to Western economies and to foreign investment, and everybody was like, China's just going to become another oligarchy and it'll fall like the Soviet Union fell. Well, Xi Jinping has really put a nail in that coffin. That's not happening, right? That nobody takes that seriously anymore. I mean, for God's sakes, they execute billionaires in China. Like, that's not happening. So I lost the basis of what I was saying. So let's move on. Unity versus division, cooperation versus adversarial. China has the correct mindset. Their actual execution, however, well, it always pays to remember that they're just people, right? They're not like some weird boogeyman, right? They're not some like scary alien species or something, right? Like they're not demons, nor are they angels, right? They're just fucking people, and they're gonna make mistakes, obviously. Like and the question is it's about the trajectory. Where were they? What are they doing about it? Where are they going? Right? That's the real thing to pay attention to, right? Too often we compare a society, including ourselves, but more often other societies, to some sort of utopian ideal that we ourselves are not adhering to or existing in, right? And I don't think that that's useful, right? I just don't think it's useful to communicate about societies or to communicate about people even this way. That the true comparison is not between what a country is and where they should be in some ephemeral sort of state, but where a country is compared to where it used to be, right? So if you compare the country to where it used to be, where it is now, and where it's pointing to, that's what you want to look at. And every single time somebody brings up something negative or something that they view China that is a down part, well, I take a look at where China was, I take a look at where it is, and I take a look at where it wants to go, and every single time it's doing that. Every single time. Whereas America, you take a look at where it was Classic example, and now is a classic example. Roe v. Wade. Take a look at where it was. You take a look at where it is. You take a look at where it's going. Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. And of course you're going to have moments where it goes, fuck you, because people. Sierra Strifey, how you doing? I'm not getting any monkeypox vaccine. Fuck that shit. Yeah, the vaccine skepticism has as we're getting farther and farther out from COVID-19, the vaccine skeptics are getting more entrenched in their positions. Yeah. I'm not going to go too big on the vaccine. Literally bought that technology. Don't know which technology. You sounded like 5 British actors that did the dubbing for every great kung fu movie. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Victini. I know, I'm a fucking professional. Right? You bring great honor to your family. Yeah, exactly. I hate the concept of intellectual property. I agree with you completely, dude. Even the concept of patents. It's an attempt to privatize stuff. Yeah. And privatize ideas. Like, that's the thing that pisses me off the most. Like, if you ask me, a big reason why we're in this sort of cultural feedback loop is because we can't use the intellectual property of Disney, right? And Disney basically owns the cultural market. And so if you want to use that intellectual property, you can't, right? So you can't actually get involved in the predominant culture. And the only way to get involved in the predominant culture is to just have a shit ton of money. So once again, the culprit is capitalism. If China do something like giving loans to the West screams China debt trap. But like a dude, what has the West been doing worse for decades? Yeah. Oh yeah. IP sucks. Yep, you're right. You're right, bud. How dare Russia demanding a country to be neutral? It is their sovereign right to do that. Meanwhile, the U.S. went bunkers when the Cuban Missile Crisis, yeah. A crisis that was entirely started by the U.S., yeah. Xi is in trouble. The CPC has been distancing itself from zero COVID and specifically attributing this stuff to Xi. It shows a lack of confidence. Yeah, the zero COVID policy is an interesting one. It is an interesting one. Like, I think that, like, I do think that there are forces within China that are quite, that understand it, that do, like, it makes, I don't want a disease to run through my country, right? Like, why would I want that? But at the same time, like, that whole, like, hey, but economic growth, right? The growth of the economy is always the thing, right? It always brings it back. Yep. Zero COVID, poor vaccine uptake efficiency in China means lockdowns are disrupting society, the economy. The CPC is laying that at Xi's feet. No judgment, just an evaluation of Chinese ruling class sentiment. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be big enough to knock Xi down. That's the thing. Like, I think that that's an interesting conversation and one that is worth talking about and critiquing Xi for sure. For sure. Don't think it's going to be even close to bringing him down. Like, Xi Jinping's getting old, though. And, like, retirement's coming. And there's one of the things that the Chinese ruling class has learned is that it's not good to keep a leader in power until he dies. That's something that I think that they've learned. That you want the leader to step down and be around as the next leader moves forward, right? To act as something of a critic or a voice, right? That they find that to be useful. So perhaps maybe Xi will step down soon. But I mean, Xi Jinping has been elevated to Mao and Deng. Like he's on that kind of scale at this point. Like he's not the same as some of the other leaders that have existed between Mao and the rest of them. So I'd be pretty surprised. Which isn't to say it couldn't happen, but I would be surprised if it did. to be honest, I hate that they give the death penalty to their billionaires. I'm actually against the death penalty for any reason, including the executions that occur after each revolution. Yeah. Agree to disagree, Eric. You and I are not going to see eye to eye on that. I genuinely believe, I said it earlier today, I'll say it again, the people that you find in this document, I think should be executed for crimes against humanity. Straight up. I think they should be tried as on the same scale as war criminals, that we should have big tribunals to expose their extraordinary lies, and we should publicly execute them. And I mean publicly, like in front of the Parliament building. Not only do I think it's a good thing to do, I think it's a desperately important thing for us to do. It'd be a good thing for us to do to grow our society up. I had a clown today insist that if there were no landlords, we would have no rental. If there were no landlords, we'd have no rental. I know what they meant, but I was like, you're so correct. Yeah, I know, right? I know, dude. Like, it's so embarrassing when these guys say stuff and you're like, yeah. Like, you just want to destroy the economy. Yeah. Is that what we're doing here? Is that the whole point? Like, it would be like looking at Luke Skywalker as he's getting into his X-Wing in order to go blow up the Death Star and have somebody say, you just want to destroy the Empire's economy. And he's like, yeah. Like, yeah, yes, correct. You know? Like, I used to get, like, into, like, an intellectual fuffle with all this to try to be like, well, no, but, like, and to try to keep them on board. I don't do that anymore. I literally, like, when these guys say that stuff to me, I'm just like, yeah, that's right. Like, I want to destroy the place. Like, of course. Like, this system is generating an apocalypse. Like, do you not understand that? Like, if you don't understand that the system that we live in is generating an apocalypse, then you can basically say what you like, right? Doesn't matter. I'll get my vaccine. I'll get every vaccine my doctor tells me to. Yeah. Anyone who's not getting vaccinated, please do not go see any healthcare worker if you get sick from the disease you could have been vaccinated against. Good for you, my doctor told me she couldn't tell me there were no side effects, long or short term. She didn't advise me either way. We're getting into the vaccine. We're getting into the vaccine conversation. The vaccine conversation is an interesting one to me. Like, my position has always been from the beginning, do as the frontline workers tell you to do. That's always been my position. Don't listen to don't listen to the government. Don't listen to the corporations. Don't listen to, like, the international, like the World Health Organization or any of that, right? Listen to what your doctor and what your nurse has to say. It just means there's no chance he's going to start a war with America or Pelosi visiting Taiwan. Yeah, like, I mean, I just don't see that happening. I just think it would be too, like, why? Like, why? Like, what legitimate threat does this actually pose, right? Like, I think that's what it really comes down to. It's like, Pelosi visiting Taiwan is dick waving, but it's not like a real threat. It's not like Pelosi is going to, like, turn into fucking, I don't know, like a Gundam warrior and blow up Xiamen or something, right? Like, you know? I was an M-COVID-0 from near the beginning. I called on Ontario federal governments to close our borders about 10 days before New Zealand closed their borders. Oh yeah, dude. Should gay people who refuse to take precautions not be seen by healthcare workers, given that it's transmitting most virulently amongst that population? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Monkeypox, not an STD. Yeah, that's true. But it is transmitted the most within the... That's what's being reported, certainly. Yeah, the WHO has been acknowledging this. Yeah, that is what's being reported, certainly. Ignoring it because I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think that's what's being said here, Victini. I think that CR Strife is playing devil's advocate a little bit here. They closed down the whole world for COVID, but let gay pride parades go on, knowing full well what was happening. I'm not getting any vaccine because of that's not solid thinking, though, CR Strifey. Right? I'm not getting a vaccine because of the behaviors of other people. I mean, too bad. You know what I mean? Like, is it unfortunate? Sure. But you should protect yourself. Right? It's like ignoring COVID because it only kills old people. John, are you considering dental retirement? Just relaying the ad I got. Thank you, Ligandes. I appreciate that. What the hell is dental retirement? Am I retiring my teeth? Is that what I'm doing? But pretending it's a gay disease is pure evil. Yeah. I think that's closer to the mark, right? Like, what is being reported by the World Health Organization and by other communities is that monkeypox is spreading most rapidly through the gay community. And I think that makes a type of sense, right? The gay community is very sex positive. There's a lot of physical contact, right? A lot of that kind of stuff. That's why I secretly wish that I was gay, honestly. Gay people seem to be having the best time, right? In terms of that kind of stuff. Just a little joke for you. Please don't take that shit seriously. But I don't think this is a good argument, CR Strifey. I think that, like, it's simply the spreading of the disease itself, right? That if you get caught up in the who's responsible kind of way of thinking, what matters most is your own health and your own safety, right? And that's what makes the most sense to me. And if it really started coming out that, like, this is a very serious thing, we've got a vaccine against it, I think the wise position is to probably just get the vaccine. We are seeing more and more states declare it an emergency. We're starting to see more and more serious stuff coming out about monkeypox. Monkeypox does look serious, right? And guys, like, the hard reality on a lot of this stuff is that we're going to see bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger outbreaks. Like, it's just the truth. And so this one is spreading most virulently through the gay community. Okay. Well, the next one's going to spread throughout the Polish community. And the next one's going to spread throughout the German community. And the next one's going to spread through the Chinese community. And the next one's going to spread throughout the Christian community, right? And every single time we're going to have the same conversation. Well, they shouldn't do that thing that's spreading it. Well, too bad. Like, that's kind of the bottom line on it. It's just too fucking bad. Like, that's what they were doing, and then this thing spread around because that's what they were doing. Yeah, anyone but the white Anglo-Saxon community. Exactly, Ligandes. You got it, bud. White people are far too powerful. We'll just crush the disease with our superior genetics. What? I'm not a Nazi. You're the Nazi. I can't deny my position is influenced by what happened to be in my mom. Yep. Re-COVID vaccine. I will not be mandated to take anything else. If they mandate number 3, I'll be out with freedom protesters. You know, it's the vaccine. It's the mandating, right? It is the mandating that really does kick people into this position, and it's here's the struggle that I have. I'll tell you my position, right? Because I don't want to condemn anybody, because I think that the vaccine thing is a very difficult position and a difficult conversation full of huge emotions, things like our mortality, social responsibility, personal safety. It's a health and safety issue. There's a moral component to it. It ties in with power and power structures, the class dynamic. So there's so many intersecting ideas and points that it's become open. Yeah, exactly. For a bunch of supposed communists, where's the community care aspect? Exactly, and that's the other part of it too, right? Sorry for being harsh, but these diseases are far worse than the vaccine. Yeah, I mean, and but I think what's being said, Adam, is the concern is that I hear most commonly from the side of the freedom protesters, right? The people who are most anti-vax, right? Like many of them acknowledge that, right? Many of them acknowledge what you just said. That yeah, like from a health and many of them also even have the vaccine. Their concern is mandating, is that the government, when policy begins to drive science, my trust is no longer there, right? It's when do we get to a point where there is a genuine concern that we can legitimately talk about without being accused of being irresponsible or callous or uncaring? When do we actually get to talk about, is this government overreach? Is the government coming in and saying something to us that is too far? And it isn't difficult to believe that that can happen, right? Like here in my own city, there was a moment where they were attempting to set up, like if you wanted to go into an establishment, you would need to scan with your phone a little QR code that was on the door, right? Like that looks like tracking to me, right? This whole vaccine tracking thing and putting in a whole tracking system, right? And of course it falls apart because nobody did it. Nobody enforced it. Everybody essentially rebelled against it, right? Everybody was just like, no, we're not going to do that. And so it didn't work. It fell apart instantly. But can you imagine if they took that idea and then started to enforce it and actually had like enforcement agents and had people standing outside doors and being like, you didn't scan your QR code, here's your fine, right? Like that's got to be considered in the conversation. It's not simply an issue of health and safety. It's not simply an issue of health and safety. And I think it's fair for us to have that conversation without being accused of being callous or having disregard for the community, because there are many ways to be concerned for your community, right? And that's why this vaccine conversation is so difficult, because on the one hand, you do want like ensuring a disease doesn't spread through your community. Yeah, that's community care, right? That's why I get my vaccines, right? That's why I go do it. I recommend others do it, but I respect that my position is not everybody else's position, and that there are many reasons why people don't get vaccines and don't do things, right? Actually, I just charge a premium for vaccines. If people have to pay, they will flock to it with gusto. It does seem to be the case, doesn't it, Content? It's just like nobody wants it because it's free. Well, if it's free, it must be bullshit. Oh, I have to pay money for it? Give me that. Now it's a badge of honor. Now I got me the vaccine plus plan. Yep, yeah. All of these fucking freedom protesters will suddenly be wearing badges showing people the vaccine plan that they had. So they can be like, oh yeah, look at it. They'll like put it on the back of their big fucking trucks and shit. I want to say I very much understand the need for huge swaths of the population to take a vaccine for public and community health. Unfortunately, people like myself and Mom do exist, though. And it does seem to me like most people in the society do take the vaccine and do reach that kind of moment. The trouble, of course, is that there's so much mistrust in the society. That's really, really the thing that I continuously bring this vaccine conversation back to. There's so much mistrust in the society that if that mistrust wasn't there, I think people would be more ready to move forward with a vaccine with less complaint, right? But there's just ways, and for good reason, right? Like, when I hear people who are anti-vaccine say, oh, we're not supposed to trust the government, and we're not supposed to trust big corporate, and we're not supposed to trust these institutions until they give us a vial to inject inside of us, I kind of am just like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, that's not nothing. Like, that's not nothing. That, like, here's this psychotic, lying sociopath who has done nothing but spread misery and murder wherever it goes. Something bad happens, and then it stands in front of you holding a vial and says, inject that or we'll make you. Yeah, right? The only reason that I see someone should reject the vaccine is for medical reasons and not for some stupid reason like COVID is a hoax. Yeah, that's a bit unfortunate when people say that when the largest protest movement still in Toronto is the anti-vax movement, happens every Saturday here, and the center of that movement, you go talk to the guys that are at the middle of it, and they're all saying that COVID doesn't exist. Like, they're all saying that COVID doesn't exist, and it's just like, bro, like, COVID most definitely exists. Like, that's a whole other thing, eh? It's a whole other thing. Like, there's a lot of delusion in the society. There's a lot of delusion in the society. And the fact that, like, major movements can be created by people who are saying something that is essentially akin to the earth is flat, right? Like, that's basically where they're at. And they're having these big protests about it. But the truth is that the energy that they're bringing is being caught up by people who do say that COVID exists, but that they don't. I don't want to live in fear. I'm not going to live in fear anymore. I don't want these masks and all this stupid sign and all this. I'm not going to live in fear. And then, of course, that line of reasoning usually is followed by, I don't want to live in fear. You know who's spreading that fear? The Jews. It's usually what happens. I viewed most of them with that kind of attitude, committing a gerontocide, especially considering for what I'm doing, going true because of their careless actions. Yeah, going through, yeah. I actually argue the only reason that conservatives are so paranoid about COVID is because of the fascist president Donald Trump. I mean, what's unfortunate about this conversation is that there isn't really anybody. I shouldn't say there isn't anybody, because that's not true, but it does seem like there isn't. We're not having, like, real open conversations about this. We're not really talking about the mistrust, you know? And because if we actually talk about the mistrust, then something really key will be illuminated, right? Why is there this mistrust? Why are people rejecting this vaccine on such a scale? And the reason why we don't want to actually have a conversation about that mistrust is because people will start to recognize that the true culprit was capitalism all along. That if we actually walk up to the villain and unmask it, well, underneath, it'll be capitalism, right? And some of the stuff that these freedom people say, like, how often have I said this, guys? I say this all the time. A lot of these freedom protester guys sound like communists. They sound like communists. The stuff that they say the working class versus the wealthy class, the mistrust of institutional power, the mistrust of corporations, the mistrust of this. It's just that when you get into the solutions, they break and become libertarian, right? They break and they sound crazy, essentially. But up until that point, like, they sound like communists to me. They sound like they have an understanding and a mistrust of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. It's just that their solution is that they want to become the bourgeoisie. That's their solution. No matter what, you still can't take away that choice from people. You got to convince them the right way. They did not do that at all. They did the opposite in my mind. Yeah, I mean, during the freedom protests, the liberals refused to even talk to these guys, which to me was just like an enormous sign of weakness. And it is very much what I'm talking about, right? They don't want to talk to these guys because if they do talk to these guys, right, then the populace might actually say, like, oh, you know what, that's a good point. Oh, interesting, right? Like, the liberals don't want to compromise. They don't want to find a compromise position, right? The capitalists don't want to have a compromise position with the working class. They don't want to have to admit certain realities exist. And so they don't even want to have the conversation, right? Like, the liberals literally went from not communicating with these guys at all to declaring the Emergencies Act. That's like literally where they went. This is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm saying that the West does not do diplomacy, right? that when George W. Bush said, we will not negotiate with terrorists, right? Well, it turns out that just is them saying we do not negotiate because they view everyone as terrorists. Unless you're marching in lockstep with what the power structure wants, you must be a terrorist, right? That's the logic of the state. That's the logic of the power structure. And so the West does not negotiate. And you saw that very clearly with Justin Trudeau. Like, how powerful would it have actually been? And how good would it have been for our society if Trudeau, or at least an ambassador, right, would have actually gone and talked to these guys? Like, has there been... So we know who the central organizers are, right? You got Tamara Litch, you got Pat King, right? You got these people, right? Have you ever seen them on CTV? Has there ever been like a panel discussion? Has anybody actually talked to these guys ever? No? Why not? We're supposed to be a free, open society, right? We're supposed to be having conversations with one another, right? We have a whole media apparatus that justifies itself by saying that. I've never seen anybody even talk to these guys. Ever. Like, I don't agree with them. Although I admire the fact that they are going and taking to the streets and doing protests, because that's what we have to be doing. But I definitely don't agree with them. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't be talked to. Right? That to me is the biggest concern in all of this. Is that the central organizers of a large protest movement have been effectively silenced in the media and are not being talked to at all. We're not communicating with them. We're not bringing their issues to the forefront, even in an effort to discredit them. Right? Like, that to me is very alarming. Look, we know who they are. You're telling me that we can't have a panel discussion with Pat King and anybody from the Liberal Party? You're telling me that we can't have a sit-down discussion with Tamara Litch and somebody from CTV? You're telling me that we can't actually talk? Why can't we actually talk to these guys? Like, why aren't we talking to these guys? That seems very, very, very alarming to me. Like, what's the point of the media? If not to do exactly that. Like, what's the point? I also hold on. Yeah, I also argue we should listen to what scientists and medical doctors, first line doctors. Yeah, I agree with that. That's been the only point that I'm willing to die on, right? The only hill that I will die on is if your doctor says so, if the frontline nurses are saying it, that do that. The people who are dealing with it on the day to day, listen to those people. Well, Trump did create a narrative to pit people against each other. I mean, that's not just Trump. That's the system itself does that. He really dismisses the media, dismisses COVID, yeah. Conservatives don't want to compromise. They're way too far gone. They don't deal with reality. I disagree with you that they sound like communists. Okay. I agree to disagree. They blame everything on the government and ignore how the society operates. You know, I'm just going to get my vaccines and fuck everybody else. If it kills me, let it be a lesson for the medically hesitant and skeptical. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on this, content. Like, I feel like I will likely just get the vaccine. Like, if the monkeypox vaccine comes down and it's available, I'll likely just go get it. Because, again, like, the doctors and nurses are saying so. So I'm just like, I feel like those are the people who I trust in the conversation. So I'm going to follow their advice. Why is there a distrust of vaccines? Right-wing propaganda and secret contracts with vaccine manufacturers. I mean, I think that's part of it, but I don't think it's a simple one-to-one. Do you know what I mean? Like, Adam, I think that this is the result of a long history of, like, you can't consistently betray people. You can't consistently betray people and then turn around and say, put this in your body, trust me, and expect it to work, right? There is like a boy who cried wolf kind of going on here. And like, from a monetary position, wouldn't the corporate power structure, certainly the pharmaceutical industry, wouldn't they want people to be taking as many vaccines as they could possibly give them? Right? Wouldn't they want people to do that? So, to me, like, I think that the mistrust that we're seeing is much more organic, right? I certainly think that there are right-wing propagandists in the conversation, as there always are, right? There's always grifters, right? Because we said we have the freedom to grift people, right? The Supreme Court of America basically defended people's rights to grift one another, which is incredible, absolutely incredible. But I think that the skepticism that we're seeing is more organically brought. That like, if I was 50, if I'm like a 50-year-old from, you know, Illinois, right? Or Louisiana, right? And so I'm a 50-year-old from Louisiana. Like, all I've ever known from government institutions and corporate power structures is utter betrayal. Complete and total. Like, never once in my entire life has any institution of any sort done anything to help me, ever. It's never happened. And if I were a person who stood up and complained about it, I would be told very virulently, get a job, right? Improve yourself. You're the problem, right? And suddenly this society and this institution is turning around and saying, inject this in your body, trust me. Like, I get it. That's why I'm pretty soft on the anti-vax people. Like, I understand the health and safety implications. I do. But I also really understand this other side of it. Like, and there is, to get into like a deeper kind of place with it, it once again is this kind of like calling to the void that persists and exists throughout the society. That there is this sort of sentiment that exists in the populace that says, well, if I get this and it kills me, okay. But very straightforwardly. Like, I see this a lot in the climate change conversation, that there is this sort of attitude that permeates that says, well, if the place burns down and I die, well, okay. Yeah, okay. I'll just go back to sleep and, just rejoin the singular energy, and that'll be fine. Right? And I feel like there is that kind of ethos, this sort of sacrificing yourself to the void, or not sacrificing, but capitulating, right? You're bending your knee to this impulse, this call to the void. And I definitely think that exists within this conversation, but nobody wants to admit it, right? That there are people who are like, yeah, COVID exists. No, I don't trust these institutions. If COVID comes and strikes me down and I die, then okay. Like, and that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. And if you were to say to those kinds of people, well, don't you care that if you got it, you could send it to somebody else, and they would be like, nah. Anyway, well, that makes you a shit person. Okay. Like, that's really where it is. Like, you're like up in this like, oh, about it, and they're just like, yeah. Then we die. What are you gonna do? Right? Like, that's a really hard pill to swallow. That huge sections. Like, I don't think this is a small part of the society. Like, huge sections of the populace are basically just like, if we die, we die. Okay, let's go. Bring it on. Bring on the apocalypse. Let's go. And I think a lot of people are just killing time, just sort of waking up. Might as well go to this job. Okay. Yeah, I guess it pays the bills. I guess. Okay. Right? And then when the moment of death comes, they'll be like, oh, okay. And that was it. Like, their whole ethos for being alive is essentially, oh, okay, I guess this is happening. That's it. That's their whole existence. Like, oh, this is what's happening? Okay. Oh, that's what's happening? Okay. You want me to do that? Nah. Don't you care about the implications? Nah. Like, they don't. And you can't make them. Let me ask you a serious question. When was the last time a single conservative blames the capitalists for the problems that we face, rather than the government for all the ills that we face? So you're starting to see a breakthrough on this, Eric, which is they haven't been willing to put the blame on the system of capital. That's correct. But they are willing to put blame on globalists, right? You're seeing this statement a lot more, right? Globalists are the elite globalists, right? And I had a conversation just yesterday at the protest with somebody who was pretty far right, I would say, like a kind of a meathead right winger is how I describe it. And he watched us at the protest and he listened to us speak. And at the end of it, we had a conversation, and he was talking to us about like he was saying things like his concern was about addiction, and he knows people in his life who are addicted. And he was basically saying we should round up these people who have addictions and put them in facilities against their will. And he was very explicit. And I was trying not to be like, that sounds like fascist bullshit, because I'm trying to win hearts and minds here, goddammit. But it was some fascist bullshit. And but at the end of the conversation, he said to me, I've never really bought into the whole tax the rich thing, but today changed my mind. And I thought to myself, there you go. Small step. Small step. Yeah, you know the guy, Ligandese. You know the guy. And I thought to myself, yeah, there goes a fascist that's moving slightly to the conservative side of the conversation, right? Because I'm of the opinion that taxing the rich at this point is a conservative position. Like, if your goal is to protect the system, the conservative position is, yeah, tax the rich. Are you kidding me? Like that's why the NDP don't score points for me. They're like, we gotta tax the rich. I'm like, great, so that makes you a right-wing conservative. Like, not even a red Tory. Like, that makes you like a right-wing conservative. Like, anything other than tax the rich, like if your position is rich people deserve their wealth, fascist. Like, that's fascist. Like, get the fuck out of here. No, they don't. Like, you've got to be a baby-brained little child fascist moron to think that that's the case. Like, tax the rich. Obviously, it's the conservative position, right? An actual left-wing position would be take the assets away from these psychopaths and distribute them into the hands of the working class. That's an actual left-wing position. Taxing the rich to ensure the stability of the system, that's a conservative position. Pharma corps are one of the largest arms of the capitalist machine. I'm going to be pretty darn skeptical, yeah. They're obviously empty of all ethics and morality. Why would I want to support them? Yeah. That's a big part of it, man. I'm not saying their analysis about the government is wrong, but then again, liberals also have the right analysis on the conservatives when they're in power. It just flip-flops with them, yeah. Yep, trust in government. Cuba has almost 95% with at least one dose. No vaccine mandate in Cuba as far as I can tell. Exactly, Adam. Exactly, right? That fundamentally, with the vaccine conversation, is a conversation about trust. That's what it's about. And we're not going to get anywhere if all we do is condemn one side or the other, which it's hard not to, because the stakes are high, right? The stakes are high. And so it becomes difficult to have these conversations. It's why I'm trying to be very open with this particular conversation. Yeah. It's never beyond that. A liberal like David Pakman do that kind of analysis towards the right. Yeah, I mean, like, because a guy like David Pakman actually thinks that there's a difference between the liberals and the conservatives, right? Like, and that's what a lot of these right-wing, like, freedom guys think too, is that they think that the conservatives are going to be different than the liberals somehow. And they don't really respect or understand that it's just WWE, right? It's just entertainment. The only tax that I accept as a progressive would be tax the rich at 90%, if not more. Yeah. I mean, and like, there's a tax rate that, like, seems reasonable to me. Like, I don't consider that to be extreme. That's the thing that I think is so weird about what's happened in our society. Like, the tax rate used to be at 90% for people who made like over $1 million. Like, it used to be there during the greatest economic boom in American history, right? And why was it the greatest boom in American history? Because it forced the wealth to trickle down. It forced it to trickle down. It forced the wealth to spread around. That the oligarchs, the owners of the means of production, would be constantly put in a situation where they would go, well, if I don't actually spend this money, or if I don't actually distribute this money, it just gets taxed away. So I might as well raise your wages, and I might as well get this thing, and I might as well spread it out here, and I might as well donate it, right? Because it's going to be taxed away anyway. So I might as well spend it, right? Whereas now, they have every incentive to just put it in a corner and forget about it, right? Which is what they do. I don't understand why liberals try to argue that they are left when their policies are not remotely leftist position. It's because they want to believe that they're moral. That's what it is. Like, the liberal position is that they are, they have the better right to rule because they are more moral. That's the liberal argument. That we actually care about the needs of the populace. We're trying to reform the system to improve it for the society, right? They don't actually view themselves as being allies with the conservatives, even though they very explicitly are, right? That liberals and conservatives fundamentally agree on the principle that the means of production should be privately held. And they both agree that the working class should be fought against in their quest to reclaim those means of production for themselves, right? So liberals and conservatives agree on the one fundamental principle that actually matters. And liberals pretend as though they are more moral, right? Here's a question. Are liberals essentially what used to be called reformists? Reformist basically has been used as a moniker by everybody, right? There's no like, you have the Reform Party here in Canada, which was essentially a right-wing kind of libertarian style party that gets integrated into the Conservative Party. But like, liberals are reformers. That's like the backbone of their whole justification, right? The whole argument of liberalism is vote for us and we will incrementally reform the system. That we as liberals believe that the system as it is okay. It could be improved, and that the best way to improve the system is through slow, steady reform. It's like steady as she goes, right? So that we can incrementally improve something, ensure that the state of things is not ruptured, because we believe that things are generally okay as they are, right? But could be improved. Whereas the conservative position is, this is good how it is, and in fact we need to regress any gains made by the liberal reformers. We need to regress, and liberals tend to fail to understand, like, and so it's this dynamic that gets hyper focused on. This dynamic of, we want to reform, boo reform, boo reform, reform, boo reform. And then this turns into the whole conversation. This is the whole show, right? And there is no voice that comes in and says the entire system is fraudulent. That doesn't exist in the conversation whatsoever, right? And as long as that dynamic continues, then the apocalypse will be generated. But could you argue that the civil rights movement was a reformist movement, even though it ended segregation? I mean, yeah, I mean, in a way, the civil rights movement was a reformist movement. It was a cultural movement to attempt to dismantle systemic racist systems, for sure. It was not explicitly... although that's not true. Like, organizations like the Black Panthers were very explicitly Marxist. That's why they had to be fought against. That's why they're still fought against. And, well, and because socialists can be reformist in their outlook as well. But the key difference there, because I think what you're heading towards is, what's the difference then between a liberal and a socialist, right? Well, the liberal will always say we should reform the society, but the means of production should remain in the hands of the bourgeoisie. That's the liberal position, that there always should be an investor class, that the investor class is inherently good. And sure, we can put in reforms to ensure that the working class has a better go of it, but it's good that we have a bourgeoisie. It's good that the investor class exists. Whereas socialists would say, no, it's not good that there's an investor class. It's not good that there is this bourgeoisie that exists. That if we are going to pursue reform, those reforms should be towards disempowering the bourgeoisie, disempowering the investor class, transferring shares and transferring wealth away from the investor class into the working class, in an effort to eventually eliminate the investor class entirely, right? That would be the socialist position. And of course the communist position is just fucking overthrow them. Just get rid of them. Like, they're worthless. They provide no value whatsoever. Be done with it. Right? Like, just tear the Band-Aid off. Right? Just fucking tear the Band-Aid off. Just get rid of these parasites. That's... though. Oh, sure, what the hell. You're right, Eric. It is overtime, and I'm quite tired, but let's quickly... The climate deception dossiers. These people should be arrested, incarcerated, and executed. In public. this thing, yeah, disaster for all of us, right? This is the rapid fire. This is basically just the headlines of the day that I thought were interesting. Didn't get to many of them. A reminder that these heat waves aren't tragedies, they're crimes. The fossil fuel industry knew decades ago this was their pollution was causing, so they spent billions to lie to the public and block climate action. Yeah, they should go to jail for it. The U.S. military has 234 golf courses on bases around the world. Another level of sociopathy to occupy another country's land and spend millions so army officers can play golf. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Trudeau's, yeah, these aren't tragedies, they're comedies, yeah. We all know that. Monkeypox. FBI conducts coordinated raids against Black Liberation Organization. Nothing new there, right? Same old, same old. Snowpiercer set shuts down due to extreme heat. Climate change. Potential to end humanity is dangerously underexplored, says experts. I'm going to hang on to this one. I'm going to read that one tomorrow. This bullshit. Conservatives raised more than Liberals and NDP combined in second quarter of 2022. So it's very likely that Pierre Poilievre is the new Prime Minister of Canada. Right? Just get used to this face and get used to this idea. It's the big reason why I'm not like ringing alarm bells about it, right, is because he's basically going to rule like Trudeau, right? And in fact, actually, if you look at the actual legacy of Harper versus Trudeau, it might actually be better off for us, right? Because the Conservatives might actually look at the fossil fuel industry and be like, what's all these subsidies? What? No. Free market. That's what Harper did, right? When you actually look at how many subsidies Harper gave to the fossil fuel industry compared to how many subsidies the Liberals have given to the fossil fuel industry, it's not even close. It's not even close. That we can disagree with Stephen Harper's position that free market capitalism is the best way to organize it, but you can't say he didn't believe it, because he obviously did. Right? He gave almost no subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. And perhaps Pierre Poilievre would do the same. So, but again, the reason why I'm not like ringing the bell and be like, we gotta fight against Pierre and all this stuff is because I suspect it'll be basically what the Liberals are, more or less. We're failing people who are homeless and they're dying because of it. Former Manitoba Health Minister connects Langley, BC shootings to society's indifference to homelessness. We cannot wash our hands of the collective responsibility for failing these victims. You see why it's so important for the capitalist class to gaslight and individualize, right? That only you can prevent forest fires, that kind of thing. It's so important because if we start to believe in something like collective responsibility, then we might actually expect the ruling class to do something about it. And they don't want to. Yeah, you're not wrong about that, Adam. Like, he fought against the scientific community as well. This one I'm going to hang on to, too. Are we headed to a two-tiered food system? Yes. The answer to that is yes, very obviously. As rents run rampant, doubling ODSP in Ontario Works is the only decent thing to do, says advocate. I wish that advocate would come out to protest. Right? We got a really nice turnout at the protest that we did yesterday. I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of the people who came. I'm proud of the people who participated. Thank you so much for coming. If you couldn't make it, hopefully you can make it to the next one. I understand things are ridiculous and busy, right? That's how life is. I think the thing that was most heartening is that random people showed up. People who just like had got a flyer. Yeah, Eric, you didn't come all the way from Prince Edward Island while suffering from long COVID. Fuck you, dude. What do they mean, a two-tiered system? There's going to be people who are just going to have enough money to be able to buy food, and there's going to be people who are basically in food banks. That's what's happening. And it's going to get much, much worse. So the only people who are able to actually have food are the people with money, as always. We're going back to rationing. right? Like we're gonna have a government that's gonna bite the bullet and just be like, yeah, we gotta hand out ration cards. There's just no other way to do it. And of course, someone like me will be like, why don't you just pass a basic income? And they'll be like, right? Because they only want the ration cards to be used for like rice or something. We don't want people to be able to go buy drugs and alcohol. If we just give people money, they'll just go buy a bunch of drugs and alcohol. Fucking dicks. That's just Reddit. China's common prosperity drive slashes pay and perks for investment bankers. Yeah. Just get rid of the investment bankers. They don't provide a service. They're just parasitic vultures. Just get rid of them. Tomorrow's number. Evo Morales calls for a global campaign to eliminate NATO. I'm definitely going to hang on to this one. I want to talk more about this one tomorrow. Canada will impose a new tax on private jets, yachts, and luxury cars. Like, I don't care. Like, the rich will just pay it. You understand? Like, a new tax on private jets, yachts, and luxury cars, who gives a fuck at all? They'll just pay it. And they can afford to because they have all the money. That's all you're doing. Right? Ban this shit. Ban it. Arrest people who buy these things. Arrest people. Incarcerate them. This idea that, I'll just put a tax on it. That's a disincentive to a guy with $1 billion. No, it isn't. It's not a disincentive to someone with $1 billion. It's not a disincentive to someone with $50 million. Right? If they have that much money, you could raise the tax 400%. You could raise the tax 1,000%, and they would still use it. Because they have $1 billion. Incarcerate these people. If they buy a jet, if they have a jet, if they fly the jet, they go to jail. That's the rule. And until I see that, we're not taking climate change seriously at all. This is baby shit. This is baby shit that they're doing so that they can be like, we raise taxes on the private jets and the yachts. We take it seriously. Yeah, we do. Oh, they still use them? Oh, well. Arrest these people. That's the only thing I will accept. Arrest these people. Oh, you launched your jet to do a 15-minute flight? Well, enjoy your prison stay. That's the only thing anyone rational with a brain in their head should accept. Because you could raise the tax as high as you want. They'll pay it. Because they have all the money anyway. Ugh. Alright, guys. I'm going to hang on to these ones. We've reached the end of it. We're way over time. Bless you all for being here, man. Bless you all for being here. Sorry for being so tired today, dude. I was real bad today. Thanks, Oddity. I value and appreciate you, bud. Always remember, guys, you are a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. And you'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.